Okay. So members, welcome to the 29th meeting of the Committee for Finance in the 22-27 mandate. Members, this committee meeting will be recorded online and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings. Members and those in the public gallery are welcome to use mobile devices as long as they are in airplane mode, or indeed silent. The next agenda item is apologies. No members have given us apologies, but we do have 3 members, Jerry Carroll, Steve Aiken and Nicola Brogan, joining us on Zoom. Agenda item 2 is declaration of interests.
Chair, can I make a declaration of interest, please?
Please do. Yeah.
Yeah, and the item where we'll be dealing with next HR, I represent quite a few prison officers and retired prison officers as well, and I'll be representing their views in general terms during that, but I want to make a declaration of interest at this stage.
Okay. That's fine. Any other declarations of interest? Obviously, people can do if they go ahead, Deirdre.
Immediate family members work in the civil service. I don't even know if that's.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think probably it's nothing wrong with putting on the record. Okay. In that case, thank you for those 2 declarations of interest. Agenda item 3 is chairperson's business. I have an initial piece of chairperson's business which is on my agenda, which is to abuse my status as chairperson and say I have a young work experienced person who wasn't able to make it here today, but who should be watching us. He's not here, but he's called Finn Somerset, and he's a talented young man who goes to Methody. So he is. So I'm just giving him a shout out while the committee's happening. I'm abusing my chair's privilege, but I wanted to do that because he isn't able to be in the room today. I'm sure he'll be watching with great interest. The next item is written ministerial statement of funding for 25-26. Members, that's at page 6 of the meeting pack. As you will recall, the Minister of Finance laid an urgent ministerial statement on the 13th of November in relation to funding for 25-26 as notified by the Secretary of State. This is the total amount of UK government funding provided to the Executive before any changes at main estimates 25-26 and includes baseline funding and Barnett consequentials, including those from the Chancellor's autumn budget, as well as earmarked funding for security, tackling paramilitarism, Fresh Start, shared education, housing, city and growth and NDNA funding for Ankishta and the McGee Medical School. Also included is £661.6 million from the financial package which accompanied the restoration of the Executive. This is comprised of 520 million of stabilisation funding, 94 million from the 473 million of repurposed funds from which the Executive will decide, from the repurposed funds for which the Executive will decide the use. That is the things like Fresh Start, where the money was, and obviously lots of conversations about that, from which the ring fence was removed, and the 47 million from the 235 million of repurposed funds which are ring fenced for transformation. So that is to note, but unless anybody wishes to make a particular comment. Okay. The next agenda item is another written ministerial statement on changes to 25-26 Resource Dell Barnett consequentials. As members will recall, the Minister of Finance laid an urgent written ministerial statement on the 13th of November in relation to changes to the 25-26 Dell Barnett consequentials notified by Treasury on the 30th of October 24 in phase 1 of the spending review. These changes were advised by the Treasury on 12th of November 2024 and are in relation to conflation of local government Dell and business rates. So figures for these measures have changed, although the overall total Barnett received remains unchanged. That's something I asked about, and I don't know if anybody else, but this is to note at this point, unless anybody else wishes to make a comment. No. Okay. In that case, item 3.3 is the Interparliamentary Forum. So as chairperson of this committee, I attended that 6th meeting, which was in this room last Friday. The statement from the meeting is included at page 4 of the table pack. The forum agreed to explore how we can encourage UK ministers and officials to respond positively and in a timely way to requests from committees and devolved administrations to give evidence in the spirit of reciprocity. We also agreed to write to the Executive Office to seek an update on the latest position on common frameworks. Finally, we agreed to invite the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster and Minister for Intergovernmental Relations, Pat McFadden MP, to attend the next meeting of the Forum to discuss his priorities for this important area of work. So and an action coming out of that is that if people are content, that we invite the Chief Secretary of the Treasury to the next Interparliamentary Finance Committee Forum on the 19th of March next year to discuss the process of budget settlements for devolved administrations, and that is part of a broader bit of work that actually last Friday's meeting was useful for, which is, I think there is broad consensus and there is theoretically more openness from the people who are in the UK government, it seems, to us getting briefings from UK government ministers. And the point I made was not that we would every week, it wouldn't necessarily be reasonable for every week us to be requesting a UK government minister to come in to, so that we could say, complain or say we should, about our resource level, even though we might want to, but there are real moments where we do need to ask them reasonable, sometimes factual questions, sometimes it'll be officials rather than ministers, and we simply aren't getting the whole picture. An example would be what happened with city deals, where this was a major problem and we were only getting half the story, not because the officials were being, our local officials or our devolved officials weren't giving us the full story, but they had to kind of surmise and guess as to why this had happened in the way that it had happened. And I don't think that allowed us to do our job as scrutinisers. I think there was a reasonable, we should have a reasonable expectation as devolved legislators and committees that we can get a reciprocal level of information where it's necessary. And so I think this is, if people are content, we will write first of all to Darren Jones. I think we should also mention in that letter that the broader picture about looking, and maybe not like we have a specific invite at this point, but that we would, maybe if he wants a standing invite, he's more than welcome to come and brief us at any point, but that we, via the Interparliamentary Forum, there is a broad consensus now that we need to have a new approach or even memorandum of understanding, which is one of the things that was mooted to around how UK government ministers and officials come and brief devolved committees. There are other examples, someone gave the example of a previous culture secretary in a previous government briefing, like the Welsh Culture Committee or whatever. I'm not sure if it's the Welsh Culture Committee, whoever that relevant committee is. So there clearly are examples of it happening, and it's not unreasonable, I think, but particularly for our committee, given there is information that we need that we just can't get. And it's not that the Department of Finance aren't giving it to us, it's that they don't have it. People are content? Yep. Okay. So we will do that, and we'll write to Darren Jones on that basis. Yeah, and I have to get your agreement to invite the Finance Minister to talk to the next Finance Committee Forum about the Executive Restoration Package settlement and her work on the budget sustainability plan and the interim fiscal framework. I think because, in fairness, there is a little bit of a misunderstanding about how our restoration packages work, and I think they do think that they are kind of Brewster's Millions. There's just a cheque written and there's endless amounts of, rather than, the position around underfunding and indeed, conditions on, including on like the transformation funding, etc. And it's also worth saying, as always with these things, you will get, we tend to have looked at the Welsh experience around Holtham and thought, God, that looks much more optimal than where we are. If you listen to them talk, they're not so keen on it, or that we're one of their, I shouldn't say they in general terms, but certainly one of the, and I can't remember now whether it was the Plaid or Labour Committee chair, but they were less keen. They thought that it was suboptimal. So that's, I think, something for us when we do take more evidence on the fiscal framework and need that we reach out to them as well to get evidence from them. People are content. Okay, so people are content with both of those actions. That we'll invite the Finance Minister herself to talk to the Finance Committee Forum, and I think she might be able to correct some misapprehensions, to be fair, and also share information. Okay, so the next agenda item is on the budget and business rates. The committee has received a request in relation to correspondence from a business group coalition to all MLAs. I'm sure people may have had correspondence in a private capacity to all MLAs on the UK budget and the impact of the business rates relief. This coalition has requested that a delegation be given an opportunity to present to this committee. As members know, we are exploring a joint event with the Economy Committee to look at this issue along with other issues arising from the Autumn Statement in January, and this could be an opportunity for us to hear from said coalition. And the idea, and we're kind of exploring, the Clark team are exploring locations and options that will have the flexibility to give us the opportunity to not necessarily a formal evidence session, but and obviously we have the chair of the Economy Committee here too, so it's convenient. But if people are content with that, but we could also look to a hearing from that coalition ahead of the departmental briefing on ratings issue on the 11th of December. It might be that we have to do it on an informal basis. I'm not sure we would have the time for a formal hearing, but I'm open to members' views on that. So to kind of re-summarise what I'm saying, people are content with that in the new year when we do our joint event on matters arising, particularly for small business and community groups from the budget, that we will invite them to that, and location TBC. But so if people are content with that, that's number one. Number two is, should we have a briefing or evidence session with said group before the 11th of December departmental briefing on rating issues? My view is we could probably have an informal session with them rather than a formal evidence session, but I'm open to hear others' views.
The only thing is, once one asks, then others, do you know, because you've obviously the farming issue, as you say, community and voluntary sector impacts, business impacts, pensioners, and stuff
absolutely.
as well. So how broad? I know we're dealing obviously with the request that's in front of us. I mean, I'm content in terms of what the committee, I think definitely do the session in the new year between the two committees. But flexible in terms of what others think around it, but just with that.
I agree that if we do a formal evidence session with them, then lots of other groups will be like, well, can we have a formal evidence session? Can we have a formal... Now, in one sense, we could strictly limit and say, well, we have responsibility for looking at rates. We aren't necessarily responsible for agricultural and farming issues, albeit in the broader. So I don't know if any of these, the Deputy Chair, has any strong views either way.
I think we've all received the correspondence directly, and have been, and I'm happy to engage with the groups. I don't feel strongly as to whether the committee meets with them as a group, but.
Can I suggest then we look to offer them an informal Zoom, and not it's sort of, if people wish to attend, they can. I will certainly make myself available for it, and it might be a short.
We've already started to identify potential slots and rooms, so we have provisional bookings.
Okay.
So we'll feed that out to the committee, and we'll talk to the group as well, and let them know that these are the options we have.
Just to concur with what Deirdre said, it's just you want to make sure that you're giving fair show to everyone, and if everyone had known there was an opportunity, there maybe would have been more that put in.
I think we'll definitely make sure that everybody gets their spake in January, and I think that'll be a good opportunity to have a big full. And again, certainly I think if there are, I can say it here now, maybe this is a recipe for disaster, but if there are any groups who particularly feel they want to give us either written information or anything else in the interim, they can do. But I think if we look to schedule an informal discussion with said group, but then our formal engagement will be in the joint economy finance.
Chair, we're hopeful of 50 to 60 stakeholders. We're going to be limited in terms of space and the kind of format we want to use, but we're looking at 50 to 60 stakeholders. Going for stakeholder groups, membership organisations, where you can maximise the information fed to them that they then bring to the event. So that's kind of how we're going to approach that, is ask the groups to talk to their membership first, so that they're actually bringing first-hand experience. It's the best way, I suppose, in the time frame we have and the sort of space we're likely to have, to get maximum number of voices within that context.
And I think it's really important that we will brief people in advance that, important though they will have, their perspective will be on a range of things, that we will want focused contributions that are, one, on the impact of the UK budget that we have just revealed, two, any suggested actions for the executive in response to that. And I think we do need to be clear with people that though we are of course interested in any ancillary issues in the sense that we are all elected officials and we want to engage with the widest possible group of stakeholders, the purpose of this event is to respond to matters arising from the UK government budget and to advise us of any specific actions in response to those that they think the executive should take. I think that's quite important, that we give them a clear steer, that this isn't just a generalised catch-up about everything, every regulatory or political issue that faces them. Important though those may be, there will be other routes, and indeed there will be other committees who will engage with them on those things. Okay, if people are content, we will do that. We will schedule that informal briefing, but we will also come back to you with more information about the formal joint committee event we're having in the new year. The next agenda item is the LCM on data use and access. This is separate from the oral briefing we have on an LCM. The department has provided information on a forthcoming LCM on the data use and access bill and indicated that officials are currently drafting the LCM and associated documentation to allow this process to be triggered through the executive in the near future. Officials have been liaising with colleagues in both NICS and the UK government and are content that they are aligned with the progress of the bill making its way through Parliament. So this is to note that update, that there are one or two possible things which have occurred to me which may which link to the oral briefing session that we have, so I'll have a think about that. Now, item 3.6 is around FTC, and it is something which relates to the debate that we brought, certainly in my other capacity in the opposition, that we brought earlier this week, and I was actually very interested in the debate and in the interesting and constructive, I think, response that the Minister gave around the potential for FTC. Obviously, we have suggested at a party level that we could explore the use of FTC for regeneration purposes. And I think there will be other examples probably in other parts of the region where people might want to think about uses of FTC for regeneration purposes. My own view, or at least question, is given this impasse around what is called the Tribeca project, and not to labour on that one particular example, but it is a particularly stark example in the middle of the city, given the impasse we are at around that, frankly, eyesore, is one option using unspent FTC to basically vest or to be part of the vesting process if necessary, or some other form of acquisition. You would obviously have to create an entity that would be legally capable of receiving FTC. And obviously there would be a debate about you would want to be I certainly would, I'm sure others, around the social and community and cultural conditions that would be attached to that, and it wouldn't simply be a totally, it wouldn't be free to do what it liked, but it would have the legal character to be able to receive FTC and drive that project forward and think about some of the other. So look, my proposal is that we ask the department about the feasibility, not just of that in terms of that specific area, but of that idea in general, because I can think of other places where and given that we have talked, I think, a lot in this committee, and I can remember in our previous version of the Finance Committee about our inability to spend FTC, my suggestion is, should we ask the department to provide us with an update or a briefing on whether they think that's, I think a written briefing first, whether they think it's feasible. Happy to take another. Deirdre?
And I think all of this is worthwhile to look at the finances we'll have and how we better use it. And there is a conversation in terms of regeneration and how it's done. The big thing for me is normally communities are left out of it, or they're just consulted upon rather than actually proactively involved. And we do see the issues in Belfast. I mean, it's bounded by inner city working class communities. And in previous corporations, they literally drew a red line around those communities and kept them out of the development. So there are issues there. I mean, I think we should. I mean, we're visiting in the Justice Committee next week a project in East Belfast that has drew down FTC for housing in terms of housing the vulnerable. So it can be done, and I just think, is it a lack of the proposals aren't coming forward in terms of spending it? So you have departments like DFC probably are drawing it down, but is that being done across the board? And how can we maybe multiply those investments in terms of monies that councils can bring to the table? The other investment funds for voluntary and community sector organisations to be part of that regeneration. So I think it's worthwhile exploring it, as you say, and maybe not, I mean, this is a particular issue, there's no doubt in the city centre, but there's other demonstrations of it across Belfast and across the other councils. So it's worthwhile to look at, and the money that we have, how do we just use it better and how do we make it go further? I think it makes sense,
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think definitely seeking clarity from the Minister, because she obviously in the Chamber was open to the idea of making good use of FTCs, and I just on a broad approach would seek her view on what that meant, rather than restricting it to any particular type of project. Even just to call it as specific as development areas. I think it's even quite close, because if the Minister has a view as to making use of the FTC, it could be for a variety of projects right across Northern Ireland, including rural areas where you're, you know, falling short in terms of match funding for projects quite often. So I just think certainly getting clarity, because you seem quite proactive and committed to that. But I just feel like, you know, in a broad sense, what's her view?
Yeah, Chair, just to come in on that as well. It's something that I'd raised before, and given that everybody's getting their spec in, as you said earlier, why not?
We're here for it.
I think, yeah, there are opportunities to be more creative, and one of those is around the conversation around the potential for an investment fund focused on green investment. There are areas where there is market failure around electrolysers and a whole range of issues whereby an equity fund could make a real difference. There was previously conversation about it, and it seems to have gone off the radar. But trying to understand if that's something that is on the agenda at all for creative use of FTC, I think is something that we could tie into this conversation too.
Okay. Steve Aiken?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Maybe we could ask Reyes to do some research on how FTC has been used in the rest of our nation. I detected from the sort of the finance minister, but also from other ministers, a reluctance of departments to engage in the use of FTC because of the need for partnership and partnership process. And I also detect from across local government in Northern Ireland, there's a degree of reluctance to engage in it as well. Maybe we could request some research and see if there's any examples of best practice, or there's any examples of why it hasn't been used, because I think we keep on hearing this reluctance to use it. Might be useful for us to get to the bottom of why that is.
Yep.
Could I expand on that too with regards to research, and actually, irrespective of whether FTC was used, if we could get research on how other inner city areas in our towns and cities right across the UK and Ireland, and what model was used to regenerate, whether they used FTC or not, but that model might yet still avail of FTC here.
Okay. Good. So can I suggest? I'm going to suggest a summary of actions there, because I think there's a few things, but I think there's a broad consensus about what we can do without limiting it, while without boiling the ocean, and I'm glad there's a degree of interest in this, particularly given it. I do think there's a job for us as a committee to kind of nudge forward the debate on FTC, because we're sending this money back. It's financing rather than grant funding, but it is an opportunity that we're missing. Number one, I think we're writing to the department to ask for their view on one broad question with a specific focus arising from the debate. What are their views on the use of FTC for regeneration projects, urban or rural, and what kind of, because I think the core question here is, how could you create a legal vehicle? What is the entity that you create that meets the ONS classifications, that can receive FTC, but also have, we'll obviously have, because this is regeneration for the public good, we'll have social conditions attached and community input and all of those things, and obviously it could be designed in different ways for different projects. I specifically mentioned the Tribeca project. I'm happy if they're specific about that, but I wouldn't want us to limit to that. So I think it is right that they give us advice on the broader question of, could it be used for regeneration, urban or rural, and they can touch on specific examples in Belfast, and even reflect on precedent. I think that would be useful, given what the minister said. She responded specifically to it, and to be fair to her, she was good for responding specifically, because it wasn't in our original motion. So she had to go away and get her officials to do the homework, because we kind of raised it slightly on the fly. So I'd give her credit for that. Second, abroad to that is use of FTC generally. We've talked about this consistently. What is the department's view about how it's going about, because obviously it's used in some cases for social housing, and there are some examples of it being used, but we are a consistent and underspender. So we've asked about the specific question of regeneration, specifically thinking about the examples we've given in Belfast, but more generally including rural. But then are there other potential uses of FTC that we are not, that the department is, and I guess what's the department's view? So that's for the department. And then the second is research as above with Reyes. And then once we have that information back, we can perhaps look to a further evidence session at some point in the new year, if people are content with that. People are happy enough. And I do think Deirdre's point is well made about, this is, it's not actually just an urban thing, but obviously when you're at the city centre, there will be, just because we're talking about Tribeca, New Lodge, Sailortown, Petershill are all Mark's not too far away either, but but those particularly the North Inner City are all very, very close by. And what's the thinking about any project? I mean, at the minute, there's no connection at all. Obviously, nothing's happening, but there's very little connection far at all to people in Carrickhill or.
It's not even just the traditional form of economic development in terms of private sector. So what about cooperative development?
Yeah.
Strengthening our social enterprise sector, looking at green technologies.
Yeah, I
So I
completely
think how
agree.
do we widen it out from what it's traditionally been spent on to be more innovative? Setting up a cooperative development fund, for example, to actually grow that type of economy within our broader economy. So I think definitely the research piece, even on what Paul said in terms of what is being done elsewhere, I think would be interesting, because I know like Scotland and all, particularly with, I keep dropping on about community wealth building.
But it's important
But they are doing that in some of the local authorities in England. So can we learn from actually what's working well there, and is there something here we could be doing?
And I also think there's a question about the department or the executive being, and I'm not saying they are, I don't want to accuse of it, being a bit stuck on what they perceive to be the limitations of FTC. Like, are they reaching out? The question I would like to know is, have they reached out and had like proactive conversations with, for example, ONS about saying, if we were to set up a fund that was focused on, for example, community wealth building, which was not a commercially driven organisation clearly, but was a public, some form of publicly backed corporation, but not a part of the exec, but not part of the devolved government. Could that make use of FTC? And being kind of, I guess, front-footed about it, but we've asked that question. I think we're asking them to give us their briefing and also to be creative in thinking about how they could deploy this. But I think we have a bit of homework for them. If that's if we're content. Okay. The next, thank you. The next agenda item is correspondence re Fujitsu. I received some correspondence from an individual who emailed me, though in my capacity as committee chair, around the concerns around Fujitsu being awarded the Nova contract after the news this week about an education-related contract falling by the wayside. So we have talked about this previously. So I was going to suggest that we seek an update from the department, both on the individual's concerns and also about the broader piece, because whenever we discussed this before, we were told that the department was participating in a broader UK-wide, I don't know if it was the Crown Commercial Service or whatever it's called now, but it would be helpful to get, if people are willing to get an update on that. Steve Aiken wants to come in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, obviously echoing your concerns. One of the issues we've had with Fujitsu and other sort of IT-related contracts has gone back to previous committees, particularly some of the problems LPS have had and some of the other contracts as well. I think it's important that we get officials to come in and explain to us what the specific reasons are, because obviously if this is a wider issue with IT, and bearing in mind the digital transformation that seems to be the flavour of the month with our head of the civil service, I think it's appropriate that we get an appropriate briefing on this, because there's likely to be very significant cost implications.
Yes, although I suggest I think we might be struggling at this point to get it in before Christmas, but I think, can I suggest that we get we ask the Dallows here, and as always is expeditious in actioning our requests. We will get that hopefully quickly, and we can make a decision on the best way to proceed in terms of an oral briefing if that's required.
Just to, sorry, if you don't mind, Chair, just interject another thing. As we're coming up to the end of the financial year, a lot of the decisions on contracts are probably going through the sort of the process at the moment. It just seems to me that these are coming thick and fast. We probably need to get a bit more information about it, particularly when it comes to best value for money and sort of the significant costs we've seen before for IT projects.
I don't want to, so obviously there are thousands probably of contracts that the executive has. Is there a specific thing you have in mind about a contract that's coming up? Because I don't want to, it's not that I think it's not an important question, but I don't necessarily want us to go away and ask them, are there any contracts coming up before the end of the financial year? And should we, I just want to check what the specific, is there a specific contract?
There was I believe there was a question, particularly within the Department of Finance, about sort of improvements, particularly on sort of LPS, and also there was questions about improvements to the TRIM system. And I think Fujitsu were one of the prime contractors for that. So I'm just have a concern there, Chair.
Okay.
That
Well-
as we come up to the end of the financial year, we just need to be aware of what's going on. If the EA one has already been cancelled, I just wonder what else is in the pipeline.
Okay, well, in that case, I think that we can ask for that as part of our broader request, which is, are there any year-end issues? Are there any looming decisions? To the extent that they can tell us. There's, there might be legitimate commercial questions, but there might be. That doesn't mean they can give us, commercial confidence as a spurious reason not to give us important information. But yes, I think we can ask for that as part of it. Are there any? But I don't think we can ask for a kind of an update on every single contract that may or may not be coming up for renewal by the executive. Okay, Paul.
Yeah, notwithstanding anything on the detail of the letter or the email that you've received, Chair, but if you go back to what was reported this week, school principals were told by the Education Authority that the parties had mutually agreed not to continue with the contract, but no reason was given for ending the deal. I'm wondering, could this committee write to the Education Committee asking if they have any further information?
I think that's sensible. Yes, I think that's sensible. Well spotted. Everybody else content with that? Yeah. Okay. So, the next agenda item is the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of November. The 6th of November, because we didn't do the minutes, we had a strategic session last week. So the minutes of the 6th of November are in the pack. If people are content, I will sign them. Agreed, okay. The next agenda item is matters arising. So I'm going to deal with the pieces that are in the tabled pack first. So, following the discussion we had last week, we updated the clerk has updated our the terms of reference for the banking services and financial services landscape inquiry, and it is in the pack. First of all, we can get the clerk and briefly update us.
Just to flag up to members, we're doing these out of sequence because this was a key issue to look at. So if members want to go to the tabled pack, we're talking about...
Page 10 of the tabled pack, is it?
We're talking about item 5.10. So if you go to page 10 of the tabled pack, you will get an expanded out rationale and also then expanded out terms of reference, picking up on the issues that members had raised last week around the terms of reference being more specifically reflective about this being individuals and businesses looking at the access to cash, but also looking at financial inclusion, also specific reference to looking at community wealth building measures and how these have been successful in other jurisdictions, and also just expanding out slightly on the additional work scoping out further investigation around significant interventions, just like the creation of a cooperative or mutual bank and so on. So it's fleshed out what members had said previously in the strategic session last week. So we've tried to incorporate all of that. So if members are content with those, we can then go ahead and publish.
I only slight thing that is competition.
Because we do need to publish.
We do need to publish. It's just whether we insert somewhere a bit more explicitly about competition, particularly for small business. I know it's in the in the preamble, but it's just about. It's more just about ensuring that we've made it absolutely explicit that we want small businesses to tell us whether they think they're getting as good a deal as. Like, I just want them, I have this, it's not a hobby horse, I think they've kind of confirmed it. If you're a small business in Belfast, are you getting the same service you would expect in Bristol or even in Birmingham or in Dublin, bluntly? And I'm not sure they are.
Sure. Can I suggest then lifting that sentence from the preamble where it starts, members are also concerned that there's less competition. It's about halfway down. Lift that sentence, modify it slightly, taking off the members bit, and insert it into 2.
Yeah, I think. So I think it's consider. Yeah, I personally just would like us to say something like consider whether the financial services market in Northern Ireland is supporting small business, and even you could say small business and small. You could even bother to say and social enterprises, because they will be using some of the same types of banking products. So that would include like a small club, for example. Are they getting the kind of? I think
Just
is
thinking in
great.
terms of if we can agree a wording today, then we can go
Can
ahead
I
and publish
suggest
it.
if people are content that I will just say, are people, as one of the points, so you can see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, consider this, consider that. Could we say, consider whether or the extent to which our financial services sector is supporting small micro business and social enterprise in Northern Ireland. People content with that?
Would it not just be an expansion of point 1 with an extra
Sure.
few words?
Yeah,
'Cause
that's
you-
fine. I don't mind if it's there.
Happy
or-
if we insert it there.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah.
People are happy. I just
Started
want
at
those
point
words in
1.
there, so we're clear that it's about.
And members are then, sorry.
Anyone want to come in?
No, it's a separate issue, Chair, if you want to bring me in after. It's still on this item,
Yeah,
but
okay.
it's a separate issue.
But are people content with that form of words?
And we started in as part of point 1.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
No, just a question. So, I know with further briefing listed from UK Finance, just wondering who are we anticipating we would get from UK Finance for evidence?
This is quite interesting. The banks generally do not appear in live committee evidence sessions. I've spoken to representatives from UK Finance. There are a lot of reasons for that. One being that banks, and they are reminded of this apparently before every meeting they have, that they cannot act as a cartel, that there are a number of competition laws they have to be aware of. And our request will go to ask for representatives of the local banks. But my understanding is that that's not necessarily what we will get. We will get representatives from UK Finance at the highest level. And also there's local representation as well. But our request will go in for the banks. But my understanding is that there are a number of reasons why they will be likely to decline now.
No, I just wanted to flag it at this stage, Chair, for that very point, because I think if we are going to invest time taking evidence about the challenges that people are facing in terms of competition and access, I think it would be a missed opportunity not to be able to put some of that directly
To the banks.
To the
So
banks.
I think that's a good point. And let me say, I'm not really declaring an interest in sort of updating members. Not just before, in the last week or two before I actually had a scheduled briefing or meeting, which I postponed. It was from a local, well-known high street bank, and I had clocked that was in my diary and thought, actually, I'm not going to do that in this context. Respectfully, there was nothing. They had requested the meeting, and I thought, well, if they want to come and brief us, they should probably do it in the context of the committee. So I would encourage any of them who are watching. A lot of them have public affairs agencies who they employ, and I'm sure they'd be more than able to brief them. I think we can seek them out, particularly because I think part of what we're looking at in this evidence is whether our historic banking, or what was our big four, are delivering for local customers, and with the greatest respect to them, and I think a lot of them will have done a lot of good work and in supporting the community. They aren't going to be challenged about this or even questioned about it or given the opportunity to give their position in London or in Dublin. So I think it's totally reasonable for us to ask them to attend if people are content. Diane?
Yeah, I think that, we have a lot of detail there in the terms of reference, but, just not lose sight of what it is that we're actually trying to look at here. And I think the first sentence of point 1 just sort of captures it. We're looking here, just current context in the landscape of our bank and financial services on individuals and businesses, including, as you say, competition and the impact of bank branch closures. The rest, I think, all falls out of that, but really... Like that's the core of what we're doing on an issue that's not devolved. We're just trying to assess, gather information on our banking and financial services landscape without, diving too deep into
I think that's fine.
a whole lot of the rest.
Yes.
If it's useful, and as I say, the invitation will be for the local banks. I know in the past both the finance and economy committees have managed to get informal meetings with the banks. They've just never agreed to come in front of a live committee.
On that, I think I chaired.
All three.
I think I chaired a committee whereby we got the banks there. It must be agriculture because it wouldn't have been justice. I would ask that you check out the agriculture committee again, because I do think we got the banks in one after the other, one session.
That might be the key, because collectively they have that difficulty of not acting as a cartel, and that potentially is what we need to explore. I have to commend Paul Leonard, the local UK finance representative, who has been in contact. We've had an extensive conversation around this, and he has put himself at our disposal and is seeking to be very helpful.
Yeah.
I think he was just explaining how things often pan out, and just so that there wasn't necessarily expectations.
Well, I think around 2011, 2012, it makes me sound really old. 2011, 2012.
We're all there. With some of it's worth.
Check that, committee error.
Okay. Can I also, I think that's useful input on the terms of reference. It's also worth saying, I'm not sure it's elsewhere in the pack, but I think later this week the Ministers' Banking Forum is today.
Yeah.
So
the Minister, therefore, should be able to give a readout next week when we have the Minister in front of us. Also, some of the participants are keen to give a readout.
yes, well, can I suggest off the back of that, I don't know if they will mention that we are doing this inquiry, but I think first of all, if the department can give us a readout, a prompt readout of what was discussed, and it would be helpful to know who was there, because I think if people who are participating,
I'm already aware, Chair.
well, okay, you're already aware.
yeah.
People who are participating, I think, have already demonstrated that they are interested in talking about the banking landscape in Northern Ireland with the Minister. So there should be no, they or their organisation should obviously be keen to talk to the committee. And as people have seen who watch this, we're very nice. We don't bite. We're certainly not much. Anyway, and that was a joke. This is genuinely a fact-finding mission. Rather
Chair,
than
all of those who are present
interrogation.
are listed in our list.
Okay, that's helpful.
Okay.
Well, I think the fact that that it's happening is useful, so we can get a read for the department, and also, and we can go from there. We can ask the Minister. Obviously, hopefully, we can get that in time for a pack or for tabled papers for next week, so that we can raise with the Minister. Okay, great.
Chair, just
Thank you. Yes.
highly unusual, but I'm probably looking for a nod as much as anything. I'm wondering, will there be an official communication on the round table that goes out?
Yeah.
So we'd at least be able to pick that up fairly quickly.
Yeah. Well, I'd imagine
we
they'd
get that
have
to
some public
members
calls about it.
immediately at issues.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. The next agenda item fits with that quite neatly, and that is the Chancellor's letter to the FCA. The Consumer Council has sent the committee a copy of correspondence from the Chancellor of the Exchequer to the Chief Executive of the Financial Conduct Authority, providing recommendations for the FCA. This includes a requirement to have regard to, quote, reinforcing financial inclusion to enable individuals to access the financial services and products they need to fully participate in the economy, and was something the Consumer Council has advocated for alongside others. The Consumer Council has offered to facilitate a visit programme and/or a roundtable for committee members to include contributions from FIC, which is the Financial Inclusion
Inclusion Commission.
Financial Inclusion Commission, FCA, and community and voluntary sector partners. The Council has also proposed that consideration is given to engaging with Northern Ireland's Responsible Lending Forum, which the Consumer Council established and it chairs. I think those are all good suggestions, and I think we should follow up on them if people are content. And we should also, I think probably, given we are trying to get the best and most useful evidence from the FCA, I think the Chancellor's, I don't even have to endorse it, I certainly would endorse everything this Chancellor's doing, but if that is, I think there is a particular, to just reinforce this point, because of the sort of slightly bespoke and different form of questions here, both around the nature of our economy and also the slightly different banking market, it's really important that we're doing scrutiny in that same vein. Okay, 5.12 is, straight if people are content, is the following on from last week's strategic planning event. It's just a note of agreements that we made, and that's at page 18 of the table pack.
If members just want to have a look down that.
Are content. So I will run through them quickly, and if people are happy, they kind of shout by exception. Or nod, yeah. So we are seeking agreement for the following. 1, seek an update from the Department regarding the practicalities of and timescale for the introduction of the registration of births, marriages and deaths, registration of deaths and stillbirths bill, Fiscal Council bill, marriage and civil partnership bill, and the financial provisions bill. We agreed. 2, scheduling time for ministers to discuss a committee motion in relation to the budget process with the clerk to begin compiling a draft text for members to consider. Agreed. I think there was a very informal, loose talk about the question about a committee bill. I think this would be number 2 would be the first stage in that, and I think we would have to have we would need to discuss, get comfortable with the text of a motion and see if there was anything that we wanted to take forward in terms of primary legislation. But as I've said, then it would need complete, I think, committee consensus on that were we to do it. But it is certainly something we can discuss once we've started the process of talking about a motion. Number 3, requesting an oral evidence session from the department regarding the business sustainability plan annexes relating to potential revenue raising. People agreed? Number 4, scheduling evidence sessions as part of the committee's forward work programme around the issues about the issues surrounding potential revenue raising ideas, including potential modelling of rates reform and rates comparability with other jurisdictions, which is a point that Owen particularly made around how we, I guess, address the public some of the slight, not misinformation, but misapprehension about how our rating system compares and how our tax burden overall compares with other regions. People are content with that? Yeah. Great. Number 5, seeking further information on how much Northern Ireland is spending per head in relation to public services. People are content. It really goes to kind of our fiscal council work, but we can ask them, I presume, to do that homework for us. 6, I think we are agreed on this, that the inquiry on financial services is titled Finance Committee Inquiry into the Northern Ireland Banking and Financial Services Landscape. Yeah. Okay, so T-shirts and baseball caps are being ordered with that on it for all of you to wear. Number 7, the clerk will bring forward. That's a joke, by the way, to anybody, any actual journalists here watching this. The clerk will bring forward revised terms of reference to the next meeting as per members' discussion. We've already agreed those. 8, the inquiry will not use citizen space for a call for evidence, as the engagement will be undertaken directly with relevant stakeholders. Number 9, Advice NI should be added to the list of stakeholders. That's for the financial services thing. Number 10, the committee will schedule a visit to Kilkeel Banking Hub and will consider other relevant visits. And we will expect the kettle to be on in a certain constituency office. We're having made a suggestion. Agreed? And that includes the kettle part and all the canapes and biscuits. Okay.
The latte drinkers down there.
Latte drinkers in Kilkeel. Yes, we expect fish supper at least. Okay. Number 11 is holding a pre-brief with the holding a pre-brief ahead of the meeting with the Minister at the committee meeting on the 27th of November. If people can tell that, can I suggest that what we mean by that is that for those who are able, and some members may not be able, we gather in this room at maybe 1:30. That will be next Wednesday, and we have a quick run through so that evidence is somewhat structured. I will not, as I think shown, that will not curtail anybody's ability to ask anything they want within reason, obviously. But it's just so that we're not completely bouncing around in terms of thematic stuff and giving the Minister an ability to answer us properly, and which I think is useful. People are content with that, and obviously it's a one-line whip, so if people can't make it, that's fine, but I will enforce whatever we agree during the meeting. Okay, item 5.1, pausing growth deals in Northern Ireland. Members, that's at page 26 of the meeting pack. There's a reply from the Secretary of State on the pause of 2 growth deals, which is there, and sorry, that's at page 26, I'm just bringing it up myself now, and obviously that has been lifted now. The Secretary of State indicates that a rigorous value for money assessment will be carried out as part of the review of business, as part of the review of the business cases for projects to ensure best value is being delivered. He has held meetings with councils and looks forward to working with DOF and delivery partners as the deals move forward towards implementation. Deputy Chair, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just before this committee, I was in the Long Gallery at an event sponsored by my colleague Philip Brett on the Belfast Region City Day and the progress on it today at a really, really good event. And at it, Gillian Gilmore, who has briefed this committee before, was running through some of the details with me and had suggested what I think as a good option, that we as a committee consider going out and visiting some of these. In particular, Studio Ulster was one. They spoke at length of it. It would be great to get out and see it, and just as we've been, talking about, a lot of these things, just to see some of the things that have been delivered upon and getting out and about, it would be a really, really good option. So I just wanted to bring that proposal to the meeting.
Chair, if members agree, because that's likely to be a reasonable lead-in, so if we can get it agreed now, we'll start work on that.
I full agreement with that. People are content? Yep.
Make sure we're going across the regions.
That's the
We're not
beauty.
just
We'll
picking one area,
we'll definitely.
Yeah, and I think
cover
if we
all
do
of
that,
the
and I
plans,
think
Chair.
if we do that, certainly, particularly given, obviously we have, this won't all happen before Christmas or even soon after it, but if there are other options, good chunk of the members in this committee are related to the Belfast City growth deal, so the ones that are here, but obviously there's a Mid-South West growth deal and the Causeway Coast deal, which were, and I would get in trouble if I didn't mention Derry from my party, but we don't need to necessarily go to absolutely everything that's mooted, but I think that would be, those are potential things we can look at visits wise.
The Belfast region one's first. It's further on, so
Yes.
they might come at a later stage.
Yeah,
before
they're more
visiting.
final,
Yeah.
or more closer to completion. Okay, 5.2 is an urgent oral statement on October monitoring. Members will recall the Finance Minister made a statement to the Assembly on the 11th of November on October monitoring. I don't propose to run down all the allocations because people will have seen them, and we are pushed for time. But if people can note that. The next agenda item is correspondence to the NI Assembly Audit Committee. The Minister has provided comments to the Audit Committee on the draft budget submissions for 25-26 for the Audit Office, NIPSO and the NI Assembly Commission. Significant comments and scrutiny points have been highlighted by the Minister in relation to all three bodies' draft budget submissions. These are a matter for the Assembly Audit Committee to commit to discuss rather than us. Indeed, there's nothing stopping people discussing it if they want, but primarily it's the responsibility of the Audit Committee. But this is largely to note, unless anybody specifically wants to raise something. No? Okay. Next agenda item is a DALO readout on the request made following the 23rd of October. During last week's strategic planning session, we discussed the DALO readout, which is the method by which the committee team commission responses from the department to members' questions. Following each meeting, the table is populated with new requests for information. The department has 10 working days to provide the information unless an explanation is given for delay. This was discussed briefly. The table is in the pack, provided as an example, issued following the meeting on the 23rd of October, and I would say the clerk team do an extraordinary job at keeping track of all our multifarious and miscellaneous and sometimes vexatious, dare I say it, present company included, requests. So that explains to people how it works. Deputy Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I just want to say I find this really, really useful to have in the pack because it's a good reminder of how many things, that are being written out on and how many things are being chased. I think it's really, really useful to have it in the pack as was discussed last week. So thank you.
Yeah, I think it's really so.
Just on the Public Sector Transformation Board, is that going to be covered on a later agenda item, or can we talk about
Is this on the correspondence we've got
Yeah.
back? I think it is due to be covered.
It is covered later on.
Later when we come on the
Yeah.
correspondence, we'll discuss it then. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we can discuss it then. But and I think an opportune moment to say, as always, thank you to our wonderful clerk staff who keep on top of our many requests and keep us right, even if we have forgotten sometimes of what we've asked for. But that's useful. Okay, people are content. We'll move on to the Office Estate Strategy. The committee. Have I got? Have I missed
the
it?
bottom of the previous
Have I
page?
missed-
Five,
You see,
five.
this is, I would say the clerk's keeping us right. October monitoring, right, sorry, I thought we'd already done that. This is a different one. At page 91 of the meeting pack, members will find confirmation that the department would inform the committee about the outcome of the October monitoring round, as well as an indication that officials would answer questions on this in relation to the oral briefing on 6th of November. That's already happened. So that's
Chair,
back
but
to
we
the
always
future.
bring back the response.
You see, that's an example of complete clarity. I think we can discharge that item now. We have dealt with it. Okay. The next agenda item is the Office Estate Strategy. That's at page 92 of the meeting pack. The committee previously requested the full audit trail and disposal report for recent and ongoing sales. The department has indicated that it is the central advisory unit within LPS which holds responsibility for policy, advice and guidance, and obviously it provides us with some information on the disposals of Netherley House and Cookstown, I presume that's Social Security Office, including information on market valuations. This is to note, unless anybody wishes to come in, I think the Deputy Chair wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to flag that I don't feel this is a full audit trail, and I'd like to request a little bit more information on this with regard to the Netherly sale. So it's bullet point narratives on it, and I appreciate maybe if the detail is commercial in confidence, if it wants to be provided in a closed session, but where we're noting that we have received 4 bids ranging from 3 million to 5.5 million. I would like to see, how much each of those bids were. Then the comment was made that the top 2 bids were taken forward. I would like to know what both of those bids were, and then it goes on to say that the top bidder hadn't been able to provide a piece of information within 2 weeks, so then we're withdrawn and it went to the next bidder. So for me, I would like just full detail around that, and appreciate the details could be commercially sensitive, but I feel as a committee I would like to know, as the estate was valued at 5.75 million and it's been settled there at a sale of 5.2 million. So I would like to know the full detail of all bids received and a little bit of information as to the decisions made around that process, because I feel like that is a full audit trail, and just for completeness in terms of scrutiny of the process that was applied.
I think it was just a couple of things. One, if we ask for that and say to the department that, given we're asking for it for information and scrutiny purposes rather than necessarily public discussion, we are happy for them to provide it to us in a restricted form, or in a form that we can protect in closed session if needs be, so they can be fulsome in what they give us specifically around Netherly, and if there is any specific policy they wish to cite in terms of why they made that decision, that would be helpful. I would say probably at a certain point, it may be that we are if there are any further concerns, we may have to pass it on to the audit office, for example, to in terms of that regard. But I think we should ask for that, and we can have it in closed or restricted
Thank you,
form.
Chair. I feel like it could have been information that could have been provided with the restricted header in papers to this committee, but it certainly would be something that's disclosable within a standard financial audit, the details of those. So I just feel that it's without investigation, if the information's there, this committee should be provided of it with regard to sales.
Well, I think that I would just make the point that it's always better with these things to, I've experienced these in committees now, the more detail the better, and if it's in closed session then that will more likely satiate people's curiosity and any questions, so that more detail the better. Thank you, Deputy Chair. Okay, if people are content, we'll go on to 5.7, which is the matter that we discussed, that was just raised by Paul Frew, which is the Public Sector Transformation Board. Following the briefing with Hawks and officials on the 23rd of October, the committee requested a copy of correspondence from the head of the Civil Service to the Minister on the 9th of September, as well as any response from the Minister to this correspondence. The Department has provided the letter from Hawks to the Minister and indicated there was no direct correspondence from the Minister to Hawks in response to that correspondence. There's a lot of correspondence and there's a lot of Hawks in that paragraph, so I'm slightly losing the track here. The correspondence can be found at page 98 of the meeting pack. The Department has also provided copies of the regular communication around the interim PSTB, letters dated 10th of July, 14th of August, 9th of September. Finally, it is indicated that the Minister did receive a proposal from the Interim Board in relation to the merits of considering digital proposals received more strategically as part of a digital landscape review, which the Minister indicated she was supportive of. As per the evidence provided at the 23rd of October session and as agreed by the Executive on the 9th of May, the Finance Minister awaits advice from the Interim Board before bringing her recommendation to the Executive for discussion and agreement, which is where we are now, I believe. Does any member wish to come in? Paul Frew.
Yeah, so this is something that's troubled me on the day when we had the presentation. I don't think the answers to my questions were, and thought Brett's questions were adequately addressed. I thought the officials struggled with their questioning. I'm still worried. I still don't see the clear line of decision making by the Minister. That's not necessarily the Transformation Board's fault. It just seems to be that the Minister is taking everything that Transformation Board, the advice that they give, on board and then passing it on to the Executive. We were told that it was a ministerial decision and then an executive decision. There was no response to the 9th of September letter. We did ask that specific question and we were told there was a response. We didn't know, it wasn't clear whether it was written or whether it was verbal. But out of those correspondence, and I have went through them, 10th of July, 14th of August, 9th of September, and then the Finance Minister's response on the 30th of August, there seems to have been a discussion with the Minister on the 31st of July. Both Jane Brady and the Minister alludes to this meeting on the 31st of July. And in that meeting, there was a discussion around the inclusion of other sectors, such as the community and voluntary sector. So I would like to ask for the minutes of that meeting, and then also what actions have been taken with regards to including the community and voluntary sector, because I think that would actually be quite interesting. The Minister did also request...
when you say including the community and voluntary sector, do you mean allowing them to bid for the fund?
I take it as that, but I need clarification on that. Hopefully the minutes maybe would assist us in that. It also, in those letters, the Minister did encourage the Transformation Board to engage early with the departments whose proposals had sufficient merit to pass on to the next stage, but also to encourage a process of constructive feedback to departments whose proposals did not process, so that lessons could be learnt. As far as I could see, Jane has basically responded to say, well, we spoke to them orally or verbally. Yes. I'm not sure that's exactly what the Minister had in mind. But the Minister did also ask for a clear timeline of when to expect conclusions to be reached.
Okay. I
think we as a committee should be pushing also for that early timeline, or for a clear timeline as early as possible.
Okay. I think we can ask for that. I'm conscious we have the Minister in front of us next week, so we can ask her those questions there, and that might be the best approach. Steve Aiken, did you want to come in on this?
Yes, please, Chair. Just echoing what Mr. Frew said. Look, reading through the correspondence, it's difficult to see who's actually making the decisions between Jane Brady and the Interim Transformation Board and the Minister. And I think actually seeing the minutes of the meeting before we have the Minister in front of us next week might provide a degree of clarity about that, because it's quite important, because the Minister is supposed to be making the decisions. And just looking at the correspondence, I'm not quite sure who's in charge of this process. And I would just like a bit more clarity on that one, because the responsibility and the accountability should obviously lie with the Minister. I'm not sure I'm getting that through the correspondence.
Yeah, okay. I think, I mean, the big outstanding question we just have is, when does this conclude, or when does this come to a sort of, do we get some decisions made, and who's making the decisions, and when is the executive going to see a list of proposals, I think, and when's the interim? So those are all reasonable questions. I think we will be able to raise them next week with the Minister. People are content with that, and then we'll make those information requests.
Minutes and so on.
Right. Okay. The next agenda item, and we're just getting slightly pressed for time, so we're going to try and get through these a bit quicker. The next agenda item is Budget 25-26 and future years information gathering. Committee previously requested a breakdown of departmental responses to the DOF's information gathering exercise on information gathering exercise to inform the 25-26 budget. Department indicates that 3 out of 9 departments responded by the required deadline. Note and sort of pause at that for a second. 5 were late: DERA, DFE, DOH, DFI and DOJ. At the time of response, the TO response was still outstanding. The FSA, NI, Northern Ireland, utility regulator, and PPS all responded on time. DOF expect to receive returns from the Northern Ireland Assembly, NIAO by mid-November, and NIPSO by mid-November, following consideration by the NI Audit Committee. That's to note at this point. We'll be coming back to that, because we're going to, or the Deputy Chair wants to.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, should we consider sharing that information with other committees so that they're aware that this is something to be looking for in their committee, in terms of, speaking to them about meeting budget deadlines?
Yes, I think that's a really good point, and I would say that.
And outlining to them how many did and how many didn't, because maybe other committees don't know to ask.
Yeah. So I could just say this. I think this is quite an important point. Like, we can shout and roar at the Department of Finance and for why is it not more strategic? Why is it not more multi-year? And those are legitimate questions for us to ask. But and others will say that too. But if their departments aren't going back with information, that kind of prevents the minister and her department from actually. So there is basically a bit of us, I guess, using this forum to tell others to pull their socks up. And if we actually want to do have a strategic budget for next year and multi-year budgets, they need to provide information promptly. People are content with that?
I think it's useful just from sitting on other committees, just information that's coming from this committee
exactly.
is useful to
Yes.
them. So
I think we definitely should, and we should prompt them to say that, because they're going to be, as we always say, some form of budget scrutiny should be part of every department's job. It's not our job to scrutinise exactly how justice and education are doing down to the last budget line. Okay, the next agenda item is support for families with multiple births. We requested information on support for families with multiple birth. The department indicated that people and OD drafting officials, I'm not sure what OD, Organisational Development, apologies, drafting officials do not believe that any of the measures are relevant to the remit of the department, as is not responsible for employment law. This correspondence was copied to a number of other committees. Members are content to note that request. The next is a written statement on public expenditure, technical adjustments following the 24-25 October monitoring round. That is, I think we've kind of already discussed this one in some form. That's just to note. The next agenda item is an SR. We're a bit late on this one, but we'll try and get through it promptly enough. Members, on the 11th of September, the committee agreed that it was content with the proposed statutory rule to enable the Department of Finance to introduce some new fire safety proposals in building regulations. Full details of the proposals can be found in the meeting pack, including a clerk's cover note starting at page 111 of the meeting pack. The Department have stated that there have been no changes to policy content since the SL1 was submitted to the committee. During SL1 stage consideration, the committee requested confirmation that DSO were content with the SL1 as currently drafted. Members also requested clarity from the Department on the timescale and urgency for implementation of this amendment. The Department stated that DSO has advised it is content that the draft statutory rule is within the Department's power and is in the proper form. The Department also stated that it was keen to make the statutory rule and publish the associated technical booklet guidance as soon as possible so that residents here can benefit from the proposed standard in a similar way to other regions. The Department also indicated that further findings of the Grenfell inquiry were expected to be published in September 24 and that it would be preferable if the SL1 was progressed before September to allow the team to focus on any implications from the further findings. However, this was communicated to the Department during summer recess, and the first opportunity to discuss it was the 11th of September. We noted the clarification and assurance from the Department and agreed it was content with the proposed statutory rule to amend Building Regs NI 2012 to introduce new fire safety proposals. The rule was formally laid in the Business Office on the 4th of November and it is subject to negative resolution procedure before the Assembly. The end of the statutory period has been calculated as 9th of December 24. So members, I'm going to refer you to page 30 of the tabled pack. The Examiner of Statutory Rules has not yet formally reported on this rule. However, a formal note from the Examiner indicates that the rule will not be drawn to the special attention of the Assembly. The rule will be included in the Examiner's report later this week and will be provided in next week's meeting pack. So, members, are you content with the statutory rule subject to the ESR report?
Can I just ask on that?
Yes, Paul Frew.
The statutory rules, it's not for, we don't usually get that response. Why are we getting that response from the Examiner statutory rules?
She's giving us a heads up in advance.
Yeah, she's giving us a head up in advance because she hasn't reported when we expected her. So we would have expected the report last Friday. She didn't report on schedule. So what we've done is, so that we have something we can tell you today, we'd asked her to give an advance on her official report. So she has indicated to us that she will not be drawing attention to this. She feels it's compliant with all of the criteria she uses, but we haven't had that official report yet. So
we have the information.
She's not going to say anything different. Yeah, she's not going to say anything different, but effectively until she reports officially, the committee is agreeing this subject to that official publication, because as you'll appreciate, we have the information now, but it's not been published.
Yeah, sure.
So it's important to maintain that
technically
caveat.
it's technically not on the
it's
record.
important that caveat's there.
Jerry Carroll, Jerry Carroll.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just obviously this relates to new buildings, but I mean, can we get any information on buildings, sort of apartment blocks and flats and whatever that may be impacted by this in terms of, in relation to Grenfell, but maybe potentially unsafe buildings? So,
Jerry, we probably have that in
Yeah, because sorry, Chair, the report is still, the final Grenfell reports are coming, I think, February. So we'll have more detailed information around that, and then where it gives us anything new to pursue, then we'll pursue that. But I think a lot of things will be tied up with that report. We're expecting around February time.
okay, thanks. And another thing, sorry, Chair, was the SR introducing new fire safety proposals. It talks about, information about the person whose fire safety duties. I know there was a document included in the pack. Is it stated who they are in new buildings, or how they're determined? Is it through the council or who? So it may be in the pack already, but just maybe a bit of clarity on that, because I know part of the Grenfell situation where there was people passing the buck about who's responsible for fire safety. So conscious that doesn't happen again.
Rather than to turn them into full measures, can I suggest, Jerry, that the Clark team have a look and they'll have a look in the pack and suggest if there's a way of just clarifying that for you, and if we don't have that information clear in the pack, we will we'll do it via we'll come back to it via matters arising. But if you're content, we'll just ask.
Happy with that, yeah. Thank
okay.
you.
Perfect.
Fair enough. Okay. So if members are content otherwise, I will put the question that the Committee for Finance has considered SR 191/2024, the Building Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2024, and subject to the examiner's report, has no objection to the rule. Content? Yes. Okay, thank you. Now we have an oral briefing session, which we've caught up a little bit of time. It is on the legislative consent memorandum for digital property assets, etc. bill. Members, do we have agreement that Hansard can report this oral briefing?
Agreed.
Yes. And Hansard are behind us on the throne. At page 488 of the meeting pack, there's a clerk's memo relating to this item, previous correspondence from the Minister, and copies of the property, digital assets, etc. bill. Bill papers have also been provided. Also provided for this session at page 32 of the tabled pack is a, departmental briefing paper that was received after the initial pack was sent to members. Members had agreed to schedule this urgent briefing following consideration of the Minister's letter notifying the committee she was seeking executive agreement to the extension of the property, digital assets, etc. bill to Northern Ireland via an LCM. It is a short technical bill concerning principles relating to personal property and will provide statutory footing for the existence of a third category of property rights capable of obtaining certain digital assets, e.g. Bitcoin, crypto tokens, etc. The Department's view is that a statutory confirmation regarding a third category of personal property will reduce ambiguity in transactions involving digital assets and provide legal certainty for businesses in terms of risk assessments and investments. A reduction in such ambiguity may reduce disputes over ownership and rights related to digital assets. This could lead to fewer legal proceedings and save money. As noted previously, the DOF is carrying out a short engagement exercise with potential local stakeholders to the extent that they can establish who they are based on VPN or whatever else. Responses are due at the end of November. The Minister indicates that there should be, quote, significantly differing local views. That should there be, sorry, I didn't read that sentence out with the correct emphasis, should there be significantly differing local views, these will be taken into consideration before tabling the LCM at the Assembly. So I presume that means that if there are strong opinions offered locally, that will inform whether the Minister brings this to tabling the LCM or how she tables it. However, executive agreement to the LCM will be sought at the meeting on the 21st of November, which is tomorrow. Tabling of the motion would be expected quickly thereafter. As such, the committee has an extremely short time frame to scrutinise this legislative extension. As the Minister explains in her letter, this offer from UKG to legislate on our behalf has not followed the normal process. meaning they didn't ask, I don't think, to do it. Is that right? But we can establish that in evidence. The committee has written to the committee. The Minister has written to the committee prior to executive agreement and the formal laying of a legislative consent memorandum. The committee had previously asked about the extent of stakeholder engagement by the Law Commission, and the Department has confirmed that the Law Commission did not engage with stakeholders here. Members also requested copies of any responses from local stakeholders. There have been no responses to date. However, a list of those consulted by the Department has been provided. The human rights, equality and financial impact of the bill have also been outlined. Finally, this is a lot to say before we get to the evidence. The Department indicate that it has not been possible to indicate how many people are involved in cryptocurrency trading or the quantum for current or expected trading. However, the Financial Conduct Authority's 2023 online crypto assets consumer research report stated that when looking at the profile of adults that own crypto assets, ownership is highest in London and in this jurisdiction. Highest in London as in it's located around London itself, which would indicate probably a lot around the City of London rather than not. I don't know how they do that, if they do that based on like VPNs of who owns the digital, but anyway, that maybe the officials can tell us. In terms of how much value people own in crypto assets, research found that across the UK, 39% held a value under £100, with 52% holding under £250. Now, this is going to be an interesting evidence session. We have in the meeting Michael Foster from the Civil Law Reform, who's a frequent attendee at this committee. Thank you, Michael. And also Fidelma O'Hagan, who's in the same team and relatively new to the team. Welcome, Fidelma. Thank you very much for coming to give us evidence. The committee obviously wants to properly understand what's happening with this LCM, so we might ask some basic questions. So thank you very much for coming, Michael and Fidelma. Brief opening statement from either of yourselves, and then we'll move on to questions. Members, indicate if you wish to ask a question. Go ahead, Michael.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Having made it to your Christmas card list in our last evidence session for keeping opening remarks very brief.
Absolutely, yes.
I'll try to
It'll
do
be a
the same.
digital Christmas card by the way things are going.
I'll try to do the same again. The main thing I want to convey to the committee today is that this bill is not intended in any way to bring about root and branch reform to financial services. Yeah. Digital assets obviously tend to conjure up thoughts of things like Bitcoin and blockchain and other such recent innovations, but this bill is not about setting out any new rights or obligations for those who currently own or hold such things or use them as an asset in conjunction with other more traditional holdings. So somebody who has, for example, an investment in Bitcoin at the moment is not going to find any change to their legal position on foot of this bill. What the bill is intended to do is to clarify the law in relation to the classifications of these types of assets, because the Law Commission basically found that clarity would be very helpful to business, helpful to those who hold them as personal assets, and perhaps most acutely, most helpful for judges who may at some point need to consider these types of assets and whether it be in a contractual matter or a financial dispute or a range of other circumstances in which these types of things can be used. So, put briefly, personal property under the law as it stands can only be classified in two main ways. One is things in possession, which is basically tangible property like cash or checks, things like that. The other is things in action, which is intangible property, and those are things like a debt or a contractual right. So digital...
Right in saying that if the balance in a bank account is in the first category because it is capable of being held.
Yes.
So if you have £100 in a bank account,
that is
it's not category 2 because you could take it out and you would have £100 in cash.
That's tangible property.
But an intangible would be, I am owed £100 by whomever it is. That's an intangible, but is that right?
Yeah. I mean,
okay.
that is the position. Now, digital assets, the problem with digital assets is they do not neatly fit in either of those two categories. That's not to say that the courts haven't to date been able to deal with them. They have, but the difficulty which the Law Commission identified is that there's been a certain inconsistency in approach by the courts, and that some clarity on this would be a particularly useful way of dealing with it. So it's not the case that this bill will create any additional legal responsibilities or duties on asset holders, and it won't take away any existing rights or privileges. What it is hoped to do, and certainly what England and Wales have been saying and the evidence given to date at Westminster is that it will make this jurisdiction in England and Wales, and if agreed, this jurisdiction an attractive one for the transaction of digital assets and the resolution of disputes, because the courts will not have to take that preliminary step of identifying whether something can be classified as property or not, or as personal property, because this bill will step in and say that there is space for that to happen.
What happens in the minute is...
What happens at the minute is that the courts will look at a particular transaction or dispute and make a determination as to whether a digital asset is capable of attracting personal property rights. And for that...
is this normally arising from civil litigation, a divorce, for example, or something in which personal property is legally relevant to the proceedings and it is necessary to establish one party's assets?
Yes.
That kind of thing?
Yes, exactly that. And I mean, some things are relatively straightforward and have been set out to date by the courts in a fairly clear way. So, for example, Bitcoin is one of those, which is very common, but this is such an evolving area. 10 years ago, we might have had just the beginnings of Bitcoin, and then that has developed into all sorts. I mean, some of the terminology used in the Law Commission document would baffle most people, and there's such a wide range of different things that are currently there, and who knows what that will look like in 5 years' time and 10 years' time. And this bill is designed to allow the common law to step in and develop those principles, having this sort of statutory buffer there to say, well, this can be done. Whereas in the absence of this bill, the courts would be largely left to themselves to try to develop the law. And that could take some time. We might get to the same place, but it could take much longer, and that will leave that sort of element of uncertainty there for those who use these types of things on a day-to-day basis.
Am I understanding correctly that well, thank you very much for that and for the opening remarks. Am I understanding it correctly that normally what happens with an LCM is the UK government drafts the law and says we would like this to extend to Northern Ireland in an area of devolved competence, can we have your permission? And then they sort of ignore whether we give our permission or not, but they at least ask. But that isn't what happened on this occasion.
Well, actually what happened in this case was officials contacted us a couple of months back and said the Law Commission have reported on this and we're going to take forward a very quick Law Commission bill. Just to clarify for members, Law Commission bills don't go through the same process as a normal UK government bill.
Legislation initiated from the Law Commission?
Well, the legislation itself will be... Well, actually the Law Commission did draft this, but it was taken on then by the UK government.
Is it the Ministry of Justice here?
It is. They've taken this forward. But it goes through a different process than a normal bill, so it can be a little bit quicker. It starts, for example, its journey in the Lords as opposed to the Commons, and it starts in a special committee in the Lords as opposed to on the floor of the House. And therefore, the relevant Lords Minister wrote to our Minister shortly after introduction and indicated that the Law Commission had in their report basically touched on the fact that Northern Ireland may well benefit from this as well. The Law Commission isn't, as a statutory body, they don't have jurisdiction for Northern Ireland, so that's why there has been no specific Northern Ireland consultation, because they would tend to focus their consultation on their own jurisdiction, England and Wales. But that was how it really started, so that offer was made to our Minister. We obviously assessed it and thought, well, this is a useful, very modest law reform piece. It's a one-clause bill. It's certainly not something that we could justify taking forward on our own. So if we didn't come aboard with an LCM, then we would be in a position where we would just have to let the common law develop here, and some of those uncertainties that I mentioned earlier may be in play.
Thank you. That's really useful. Just one or two final points from me, then I'll bring another. You mentioned that this might make it an attractive jurisdiction. Now, some people would say we are an attractive jurisdiction for certain other types of civil litigation, and I think, in my own personal view, not in a good way. As we've discussed before, Michael, is there a risk, or is it? I mean, when we talk about an attractive, you're talking about an attractive jurisdiction for people who want to trade and hold those assets in Northern Ireland, but that is because if there's litigation brought, it's easier or more, is there a potential burden on the justice system?
No, we don't see it that way. Certainly in relation to criminal and fraud and scams and things, the law's already one step ahead in the criminal field.
Okay.
We had the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act last year, which extended to this jurisdiction, and that would deal with digital assets in that type of sphere.
Yeah.
This will basically allow the courts to develop the common law in the civil side, and it's not really about necessarily making this jurisdiction a more attractive place to bring your disputes around it, but more so for business to actually operate in a system where they know that a particular digital asset is and can be used as personal property. And if there is a problem in terms of their civil litigation, then it can be dealt with by the courts here in a way that is more certain than might otherwise be the case.
One final question for me is there any interaction with either EU law in a good or a bad way, or is there any potential cross-border context that is, particularly given when you think about, there's the large number of data centres in the Republic and the fact that there are a large number of digital assets that are held in the Republic too. Are we creating any potential, I'm not quite sure what they would be at this stage, but I'm asking the question, are there any potential disruptions in that regard?
We don't see so, because this bill, as I've indicated earlier in my remarks, doesn't create any new rights or responsibilities or any duties. What I would say is that we're not aware of any similar legislation in the South which provides for digital assets to be categorised in this way. But they do have the common law very much moving in that direction by implicitly recognising them as such. And you'll probably be aware of MICAR, which is the Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation, which stems from EU legislation on crypto assets, but that's more of a regulatory issue, and it's not really on all fours with this bill. But I do know that certainly England and Wales are looking at broader regulatory and licensing issues around digital assets, but that is way out of scope for this particular piece of legislation and would actually be taken forward by a different department there.
Presumably that would be UK-wide, because that would be
financial
services.
Now
I'm going to bring in colleagues. Nicola Brogan. Nicola first. Nicola.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Michael and Fidelma, for attending the committee here this afternoon. Just following on from some of those questions from the Chair. First of all, Michael, you outlined there that this is a slightly different kind of process for legislation going through Westminster, and that the Law Commission drafted it, but it's going through the Lords first and then the Commons. Do you see any challenges in the way that is being progressed, and the fact that it's like, I know it's an LCM, but the fact that it's going through Westminster first and not the same kind of consultation in that here as legislation going through the Assembly would be?
Not for such a small, simple technical bill like this. Without creating a hostage to fortune, we don't necessarily see local stakeholders in this jurisdiction having a particularly keen interest in this. This will tend to be for bigger financial organisations who might have an interest in this, who some of which are set up in England and Wales but have a presence here, and they will have probably been already well positioned to respond to these types of issues through the work over in England and Wales. But obviously, if we get a contrary view coming in over the course of the next week to 10 days from the stakeholders who we've contacted, we can certainly take that on board.
Well, actually, that was my next question, just about I know the Minister said that if she does receive any kind of significant different views on this here, then she would change her approach to it, I suppose. So I was just going to ask if you have received anything like that, or what the response has been like so far.
Okay, well, the simple answer, which may not come as a big surprise, the committee is that we haven't received one substantive response. It's pretty niche stuff, if I'm being honest. And because it doesn't create any immediate or new rights or obligations, and somebody who is holding digital assets, or a big institution or financial institution who currently holds such assets, because those rights and obligations aren't changing, it's not something that really to date has captured a significant amount of interest. The England and Wales work was a lot more involved in terms of the analysis and the research that was undertaken, which we couldn't possibly hope to match with our limited resource. So we're really taking advantage of the work that they've done and the evidence that they've received to date in order to inform our thinking on this.
Yeah, no, it's helpful for you. And just finally, Michael, can you give me an outline on the timeline you see for this progressing?
Okay, well, it's slightly unclear at the moment. Obviously, the executive meet tomorrow, and the paper is on the agenda for that meeting, as I understand it. So we would hope, obviously without prejudging what the executive's view is, but we would hope that we will be in a position then to bring forward the formal LCM material by the end of this month and after the consultation period has ended. We have got a sort of sense from colleagues in England and Wales that we would ideally have a legislative consent motion through the Assembly by around about the end of January, which obviously is quite a tight time frame, but I think for a bill as short and as hopefully straightforward as this, we're hopeful that will be achievable.
So end of January is your kind of scope at the minute. Listen, that's helpful, Michael. Thank you. Thanks very much, Chair.
Jerry Carroll.
Thank you. 3 quick questions. Michael, you said there's no new duties on asset owners with this LCM, so presumably there's no mention or talk or conversation about sort of taxation on these assets?
No, there's not. It's a simple answer.
Okay. No, that's okay. And the Chair, you mentioned about not having the figures. I requested at the last briefing about the breakdown of the number of people involved in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. But you also mentioned something, Chair, so maybe clarity on this through yourself or through Michael, about London having a highest percentage of people using cryptocurrency, and you said something about the North. So do we have percentages of people using cryptocurrency, but not an actual number of people in this region, or what's the data on that?
I'll just bring maybe Fidelma in on that point. She had a look at some of the research that was carried out.
It is very difficult to identify how many people are involved in cryptocurrency by the very nature of how it is dealt with. But what we were able to find was a Financial Conduct Authority 2023 research, which stems from an online survey from 2021, so it was already considerably out of date by the time the research was concluded, and I think it was from 5,500 to 6,000 people who had responded online, and as the Chair had said, that it found that when looking at the profile of adults that own cryptocurrencies, interestingly, ownership was highest in here and in London. It didn't go on to say why.
We have the joint highest ownership of cryptocurrency in the UK, along with London.
Yep, that's what the FCA 2023 research identified.
All that crypto you have, Matthew.
I wish. Maybe I don't it again. That was a joke for anyone who's watching. Okay, that's it. Okay, I haven't really completely, even though it was in my own note. Okay, Jerry, did you want anything else?
Sorry. Should I go ahead, Fidelma? Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
That's as much information as we were able to find. That the FCA didn't go in to break that down. It was simply a bullet point that was noted in its relatively brief 2023 report.
Okay, thank you. So obviously there's no average expected income or what the average cryptocurrency holder has in terms of the percentage or the amount, or is that knowledge available?
Yes, there is some information available about the holders of cryptocurrency or crypto assets, and the research found that across the UK, 39% held a value at that time of under £100, and 52% held a value of under £250.
It would probably be the same with a bank account. I mean, there's a vast tail. Most bank accounts have very small amounts of money in them, and then obviously a large number of people a tiny number of people have vast amounts in banks. So anyway, so you would kind of expect
just
that.
Final question, maybe for Michael. Michael, is there clarity being sought around sort of the type of property this is? Because is there a expected raft of legal cases to come, or sort of why is it kind of this clarity being sought now?
Well, it's not that necessarily a raft of legal cases are being anticipated. It's more to do with the fact that the case law is developing in a sort of more of a piecemeal manner to date. And this bill is seen to bring a little bit of clarity to that and to allow the courts then to develop the common law with a degree of certainty and an understanding of what their parameters are in terms of that development. And that's exactly what this bill is aimed to do.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Steve Aiken.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed. I think you might have alluded to it earlier on, but there's no implications with HMRC and the move for classification purposes. Has there been any consultation with HMRC, and is that part and parcel of why we're doing this?
I'm unaware of whether HMRC were specifically included for the Fidelma of Uni.
I think that they were one of the consultees.
Yes, they were one of the
consultations,
consultees
as far as I'm aware.
in the Law Commission consultation which preceded this bill being introduced. In terms of your broader question, I don't think there's a specific part of the tax system at the moment that categorises digital assets in exactly the same way this does. So whether that in future would be subject to change, but bear in mind that would be way outside of the remit of both this bill and indeed of this department.
But by passing this measure in Northern Ireland, that will mean that there will be a distinctive class that covers these areas. So actually, for future taxation or whatever sort of routes ahead, it'd be much easier because there then is a distinctive class that can be looked at.
Well, I think we have to be careful in saying it's a distinctive class. It's a distinctive class only insofar as it allows the courts to develop the common law to take into account digital assets now and in future. So there will be certain things now which won't fall into this category and others that will, depending on their characteristics and their nature. So I don't, and the courts would arrive at that place in any case as we go down the line. This is very much seen as a way to simplify that process and to give legal certainty both to investors, to businesses and to the judiciary when they come to determine any particular disputes that involve digital assets.
So are we expecting a degree of sort of actions that are likely to come through that will come before the courts? Is there an expectation that there is a likelihood of this happening?
No more so than there already is, Chair. The courts would still deal with these types of issues in the course of litigation. But what they do have now is, or will have if this bill is passed, is a degree of certainty as to the parameters in which they can operate, and they can develop the common law accordingly to take account of the different types of digital assets that both are present at the moment and which may be present as the law develops in future.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that, Chair. Thanks for the evidence. Cheers. Thanks.
Thanks. Now, Paul Fruit.
You say that nobody has come back with regards to consultation. How many did we consult with, and what sort of people did you consult with?
Well, we have a list which I think was submitted to yourselves, but I mean, in the relatively short space of time, we restricted our consultation to quite a targeted number of groups. So, for example, credit unions, Federation of Small Businesses, a number of the banks in this jurisdiction, the Northern Ireland Chamber of Commerce, the Law Society, the Law Society's financial advice side, the Bar Council, some of the big accountancy firms. Some of the sort of things like Citibank, who would be renowned for dealing in these types of issues, CME Group, Fiscal Council, and academics at both the universities here.
Okay. So pretty much a common list what you would do with all sort of legislation, but again, you would expect some of them to at least have come back with something.
Well, I mean, there's two sides to it. Firstly, some of those may well have been involved either directly or indirectly with the Law Commission work, where they have a presence not just here but also in England and Wales. And then secondly, as I've maybe created the impression that this is quite niche, and because it doesn't create any immediate rights or obligations or duties, those organisations may well be content that this bill proceeds as it is.
Yeah, I see the list now. Thank you, Clark. On the issue then about, it's basically law. I loathe to use the word enabling, but it's basically enabling the courts to define what property is.
That's exactly it. The courts at the moment are have precedent which dates back to 1885, where clearly, even in 1985, digital assets weren't even on the radar. So in 1885, the case of Colonial Bank and Winnie basically set out that there are two types of personal property, and the courts have had to work within that framework to date. Now, they have been able to be imaginative in terms of how they deal with digital assets, but this bill basically says, well, here they are, develop the common law as can be seen fit, with this in mind, that there is this distinct third category of personal property.
So digital currency is one thing, but a digital presence where you can make money is another. So what I mean by that is some people make a lot of money on YouTube channels. So is YouTube channel where you've made a lot of money, is that now going to be defined as property?
Well, that will be for the courts to determine.
Right, okay.
At this stage, the answer to that is that there's no exhaustive list of what is and what isn't, and that's deliberately so, to allow that flexibility for the common law to operate in the way that it can do, in order to determine whether A is a digital, A can be determined as property, whether B can, or whether C shouldn't. So the common law and the courts will be able to develop the law based on the parameters that are set by this bill.
I take that most people here that would have cryptocurrency use it like shares, basically in any FTSE 100 or whatever. Shares, I take it, is property.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's just basically aligning that type of thing. Yep, okay, I'm content, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really fascinating area just because of it's an interesting subject of the law. I think, I'm not sure where we get the information, but I think it's genuinely interesting that we have the highest holding, or I don't know if it's in absolute or proportionate terms, because if it's in absolute terms, that's even more interesting. Or if it's in absolute terms, then that's fascinating because of a small population. Proportion of crypto holdings in the UK. Is that, do we know if that's proportion per
I'm
head?
not sure that it, Fidelma can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't, our assessment is it's not necessarily the amount of holdings, it's the number of people who dabble in cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin or whatever.
Okay, that could be the number of people. Okay, even still, that's, again, if it's an absolute, whether it's an absolute or proportionate number, it's interesting. I wonder if it's an action for us, perhaps, as part of our brief look at this, that we ask the FCA to elaborate a bit on that information, just so we can get a fuller picture of it, so that we can say that we've done our work. I also was going to suggest, I don't know if it's it's one for the department to think about. It's probably not one for our committee. If it is reaching out, to, endeavouring to get information, and if part of the purpose, certainly if part of the purpose from the UK legislation is to make it a more attractive place to hold or trade these assets, then is there a worth in communicating to people? Because if the people, it sounds like the people who are holding these may be individuals who have, for whatever reason, a financial advisor has advised them to stick a couple £100 of their savings into crypto rather than like an ISA or whatever it is, or it might be people who are sitting with a VPN somewhere in their garage who hold thousands of pounds or tens of thousands of pounds. It's just I wonder if one way of is if the department should be just tweeting or putting on social media, give us your views on this. Perhaps not, but that's just something to leave with the committee in terms of, because it sounds like some of the more traditional stakeholders, the banks, the fiscal council, the universities, are no more likely going to be able to have a reach into those people than yourselves. In any case, I don't have any more questions. If any others do, I think we will await confirmation that has been agreed at the executive tomorrow. Ideally, write to the FCA to see if they can provide us a bit more information on why this unique situation, this interesting situation pertains, where we have high levels of crypto assets, and then we will come back to this, because we will have to give our view, I think, on the LCM to the rest of the Assembly at some point. So we will have a further discussion on it. At this stage, thank you, Fidelma and Michael. We really appreciate your time as always. I would just sit and note again, because it's something I think that is interesting, given the amount of work that the small but hard-working Civil Law Division does in the Department of Finance. It's your colleagues in the UK Ministry of Justice who are sending you this information, and it does, just to reiterate this anomaly about the amount, the breadth you have to cover, and that's a tribute to you. Whereas in most other jurisdictions, civil law sits within the Justice Department, and they're properly resourced to do it. But you guys do a great job in the minimal resource. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, it is the most interesting committee in the Northern Ireland Assembly. No offence to the Economy Committee.
Democratic Scrutiny Committee, I think one would say, is the most interesting.
In any case, okay, thank you, colleagues. The next agenda item is on Nick's sickness and absence. If you, and obviously, if we can have agreement that Hansard can report this for us, if people agree with that, and please turn to page 592 of the meeting pack, which has a clerk's memo relating to it. Additional papers provided are the departmental briefing paper from the 20th of November, departmental correspondence regarding unfilled vacancies, NISRA sickness and absence 23-24, quarterly sickness absence in Nick's April-June 24, departmental correspondence regarding quarterly sickness absence, DALO readout response on the pre-recorded interview process, which we've discussed, the DALO readout response on PTSD and sickness absence policy, and the DALO readout response on structure of HR services, including the role of HR Connect. A lot to discuss, but thank you very much. We have Catherine Shannon, who's the Deputy Secretary, and for Nick's HR from the department, Debbie Sherlock, Director of People Services, and Dr. David Mills, who's the Lead Medical Officer in Nick's Occupational Health Services. Thank you all very much for coming to brief us. Catherine, please do give us a brief opening statement, and then we'll move on to questions. As I say, we'd like to have more time for questions, so please keep your opening statement brief, and then we'll have lots of questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, Chair, Deputy Chair, committee members, thank you for the opportunity to provide you with an update on a range of HR matters, Chair, which you've already alluded to, but particularly in relation to sickness absence, the approach to using the pre-recorded interviews as part of recent recruitment process and unfilled vacancies. And as you say, I'm joined by Debbie Sherlock, Director of People Services, who joined Nick's HR on the 1st of October, and Dr. David Mills, who joined us in March of this year. In terms of sickness absence, so on the 10th of September, the Northern Ireland Statistics and Research Agency published its annual review of sickness absence stats for NICS for the financial year 23-24. Anxiety, stress, depression and other psychiatric illnesses was the absence reason that accounted for the greatest proportion of working days lost during this period. And within that category, work-related stress accounted for 38%.
Just to clarify, so the by far the biggest area for long-term sickness was work-related stress.
In that category, in terms of the mental health related absence.
Yeah. But mental health
was the most significant.
Mental health was the biggest, and within mental health,
work-related stress was 32%, was a subset of that.
And mental health is what percentage again? Sorry, relative to physical or.
It was over 43%, I think, Chair, but I can clarify.
43% is mental health related things, and within that,
that's the percentage for work-related stress. Yeah.
Thank you.
I suppose it should be noted, just NISRA recently released stats for the first quarter of this year from April to June, and the majority of departments experienced a decrease in absence levels compared to the previous quarter. So in terms of our actions to support sickness absence reduction within NICS, we recognise the need for an understanding and supportive approach in the management of sickness absence, as well as the significant impact of ill health and sickness absence and the cost of quality of service delivery. All sickness absence within NICS is managed in line with statutory requirements and the relevant NICS policy. In terms of the support that we've provided, we've developed a multi-tiered management of sickness absence toolkit available to managers, developed in collaboration with our NICS policy leads to help managers appropriately manage staff absence during, following and return to work. Between March and September of this year, we've completed a review of absent management within NICS to standardise and streamline the process, including the introduction of a case management approach between our colleagues in employee relations, occupational health and human resources business partners to enable us to provide a more consistent and effective management of absence across NICS. From June of this year, we've introduced a piloted approach to a wraparound service, again working closely with our departments, to provide a mechanism to analyse absence or potential for absence and to develop a greater understanding of the reasons for absence so that we can then put in place a more targeted approach. We regularly meet with our department senior managers and boards regarding sickness figures and work closely with our trade union colleagues. All NIC staff have access to a range of health and wellbeing information support and health promotion services, including reimbursement scheme for the cost of annual flu jabs, health promotion information and events delivered via our NIC's Well programme, which incorporates support, education, information on a wide range of health and wellbeing issues. Specifically, Chair, in relation to our support for mental health, and given the prevalence of mental health issues both in the workplace and wider society, we've taken a proactive approach to promoting and supporting colleagues, offering a comprehensive range of interventions, particularly this year. So, for example, our next one-year people plan, launched in June, commits NIC's departments to support and improve health and wellbeing. It includes a greater emphasis on preventative health and wellbeing interventions with a strong focus on mental health. Following the next survey in May of this year for our staff whose mental health has been impacted as a result of bereavement, we had more than 2,000 responses from staff, and we've subsequently implemented a range of initiatives from September of this year. These include one-to-one bereavement counselling services, group sessions delivered by our community partners and crews, information and support on baby loss awareness in partnership with SANS, as well as various ongoing signposting and support events. In March of this year, NICSHR initiated a public sector occupational health forum to develop a system-wide collaborative approach to support the transformation and development of occupational health services across the Northern Ireland public sector, including representatives from NICS, from both the Department of Finance, Department of Health, Health Trusts, the Education Authority and PSNI. 3 task and finish groups have now been established to take this work forward. From October of this year, following a successful recruitment campaign, we have enhanced the capacity of our occupational health and wellbeing service with the addition of additional medical officers and new occupational health technician roles, with further recruitment of nursing staff to commence for this year. And even just over the last year, in terms of comparable activity in our performance last year, where our waiting times for occupational health appointments was an average of 24 weeks, as of October this year, this is now 5 weeks, a 79% reduction. Our focus for the coming year is promoting a preventative approach to occupational health. In October of this year, we established the NICS Mental Health Forum with representatives from all departments and trade unions, with monthly meetings scheduled. The purpose of this forum will be to share best practice and learning and to develop collaborative approaches across NICS to support our staff. We will agree a prioritised action plan across departments to support. Key piece of work being taken forward will be a detailed analysis of mental health related absence, led by our medical officers with a specialist interest in mental health and NISRA. We are also looking across the public sector and include involvement of the Health and Safety Executive colleagues as members of the forum. Committee also saw specific information in relation to specifically concerning support for staff with PTSD. All NICS staff, including staff working in the Northern Ireland Prison Service, have access to NICS Employee Assistance Programme, and the programme is delivered by Inspire Workplaces, includes access to 24-hour free service helpline, confidential counselling services and a range of therapeutic support services. All NICS staff also have access to NICS Welfare Support Service, and this may also include supporting staff who may be suffering from PTSD or other mental health conditions. In terms of prison grade staff absent due to sickness, NIPS provides a range of additional interventions, which includes an embedded HR business partner team who offer advice on sickness absence procedures, as well as referral to welfare and support services. NIPS provides additional support to prison officers through their arrangement with the Police Rehabilitation and Retraining Trust, who provides services for staff experiencing mental health illness or who have sustained a physical injury that can be referred, and they can be referred to them for counselling and or physiotherapy. These services are widely available and used by numerous officers both while in work and when absent due to sickness. And NIPS also provides a further layer of support for staff through the Critical Incident Stress Management Initiative, which provides an effective and voluntary confidential debriefing procedure to help normalise the overwhelming physiological, psychological and emotional responses to minor, moderate and severe critical incidents. With the permission, Chair, I can move on to the recruitment-related issues, or do you want me to stop there?
It might be worth us stopping there. Can I suggest that we do that and we go and do some questions on absence and then we can come back and talk a bit about recruitment, because they are obviously related but fairly distinct issues. If members are content with that, so members do indicate. If people want that, so well, first of all, thank you very much. That's really fulsome. We really appreciate you coming to give us evidence. I suppose my first question is that we have I mean, is it fair to say that we have a strikingly poor, perhaps that's the wrong word, we're in a very poor place, bad place when it comes to the level of long-term sick leave in the Northern Ireland civil service? Would that be fair?
Yes, and it's probably reflective across other public sector organisations and more generally, Chair, but yes, and that is why we've looked to put in place this year in particular proactive and a sustained effort in terms of addressing that.
Yeah. You mentioned that the most recent NISRA data suggested an improvement, but from my looking at the most recent NISRA data, it actually suggests that the 13.8 days off average was in 23-24 was up on the previous year. Is there a more recent?
It's just it's the April 24 to June 24, Chair.
Comparable to the same quarter last year, it's actually worse.
Yeah, but it is worse though this year than last. The 23-24 number is worse than the previous year, I think.
Yeah.
Yes. If you look at, I'm just looking at the NISRA data as well. In terms of NICs, I mean, we are. I'm looking at it. I don't want that. People may have it in their packet 622.
622.
But it's the where we are in terms of days lost. So if you think about our comparator, obvious comparators for us are, well, we're significantly ahead of the Republic, but we're almost double where the Scottish Government is. It just strikes me that there appears to be in 2020, which is COVID year, there was the councils fell dramatically. I don't quite know why that is, if there's a reporting issue around people being in the office less, but everyone dipped a bit in the COVID year, but then there's been stabilisation elsewhere and even slight falls in some cases in terms of working days. I'm talking about working days lost here, but the Northern Ireland Civil Service just has gone up and up, basically, in terms of days lost. I suppose a simplistic question, why?
And I suppose that's why we've undertaken the work that we're trying to do this year, Chair, in terms of looking at the reasons why. And I suppose what we've identified first, and it's looking at sort of the broader reasons. So looking at the composition of our workforce, the age of our workforce, the gender breakdown. So it's really looking at the different reasons that would be the case, particularly within Northern Ireland and across society in general, the increase in mental health and anxiety-related illnesses. And I suppose in terms of our waiting lists are also not comparable to other sectors either. So
waiting lists as in health NHS waiting lists.
So I suppose it's a multifaceted, which is why we've tried to come at it from a number of different angles. So looking at in terms of working with our colleagues across departments on initiation of mental health forum, looking at our broader public sector colleagues across health trusts and other organisations to see if there are economies of scale or different pieces of work that we can do together collectively to address the issues that we all face. So we absolutely recognise that it's an issue, but we are committed in terms of the initiatives that we've started to take forward this year and plan to take forward to address that and hopefully reduce those numbers.
With the biggest single absence of mental health is a bigger driver of absence than physical sickness, and obviously sometimes the two interact, and all of the reasons for absence for mental health, stress is the biggest reason. At what point is how is that recorded and how is it required? Somebody is required to, what do they have to tell their line manager basically to be recorded, and at what point is a doctor's note required?
I suppose it just depends, really. There could be a referral to occupational health as well. So, I mean, a doctor's note if someone's off as a result of absence will be required. There's a self-certification process within 7 days, and after that, they will require GP certification. But I suppose what we've been trying to do in terms of the standardisation of our processes to ensure that we're moving in.
In fact, at what point will they require GP certification? At what?
After 7 days. So there'll be a self-certification process before that. But and again, Chair, we want to be more preventative. So we want to support our managers to ensure that they're identifying those issues as early on as possible, so that hopefully our staff aren't going off in the first place. And again, even just looking at bereavement in terms of I mean, given the demographic of our workforce, it's looking at, look, if we know that bereavement is the reason why our staff may be off and impacting on their mental health, what can we do to support them to come back into work more quickly in a more timely way?
Just on the, is there any data which suggests that, and I'm not in any way implying that people are using the 7 days vexatiously or they're skiving, but certainly is it possible that people, you know, are looking at the people who might legitimately be very stressed out and have those issues, but they know that after 7 days they might have to go to the GP, and that might be logistically hassle. They might not be able to get an appointment. So are there people who are having 6 days off and then going back for a few weeks and then another 6 days off which ultimately builds up more sick days because they're not getting a medical intervention should they need one, and however that, you know, whether that's CBT or medication or just some kind of intervention. Is that happening?
That would trigger our processes from HR perspective in terms of managing absence and having that overview of absence spells. So, and we don't have any evidence to suggest that staff are doing that. But again, I suppose in terms of spells of absence, our role from HR is if we do see patterns of emergence for members of staff, are there additional mechanisms that we can put in place in terms of supporting staff, but also if there are issues or where we are identifying that is potentially being abused, then we recognise that we will support managers in terms of that process.
Okay. One of the, in the NISRA report, and I don't know if this is NISRA's classification or this links to how NextHR records it, but they talk about, it says under a heading, anxiety, stress, depression, other psychiatric illnesses. That slightly concerns me because anxiety and stress aren't necessarily psychiatric illnesses. We all experience anxiety and stress, which we all have to manage on a daily basis. And I suppose I suppose my question is there how do we arrive at that category where there's one broad category which ranges from, and sometimes not dealing with anxiety and stress is what leads to acute psychiatric illness, but often they are completely distinct things, and sometimes there's a problem with conflating them. So I'm just interested how do we differentiate between those things, or and assume managers and NextHR does?
Well, do you want to?
I think I'm not sure what NISRA uses specifically in terms of their
to be fair, I'm reading from a NISRA document, so it's just a bit unfair to have from it.
I mean, one of the problems I think generally is in terms of certification, which is the data I presume that NISRA is using. Yeah. So sometimes stress is written down, but actually stress is but one of the problems, or it is put down as stress because they don't particularly want to put down anxiety or depression. So it's a very mixed picture. Okay. And similarly, yes, everybody gets anxious, but then you cross a line and it becomes an illness. Yeah. So, I mean, you would expect that if people are being certified as ill on that basis, that they have crossed a line in terms of being the level of anxiety, and it is a diagnosis. So I think generally there's when you look at these kind of figures, especially in mental health, and it's classified as work-related. Certainly in my experience, there would be quite a proportion of people who may tell you this is not work-related, but there is a work-related component. And similarly, quite a lot of people come and it says work-related, but whenever you talk to them, there are a lot of other elements that are outside of the workplace. So it's quite a mixed picture, really. There are clearly a percentage of people that, when you talk to them, there is no doubt that this is entirely related to their work, and that is within the civil service and everywhere else that I have been.
Okay. How does that, like historically, how does that match against, you may not have the perfectly comparable historic data, but going back a decade or 2 decades, can you give a broad view on whether there are markedly more people off for anxiety, stress, depression, etc.?
I think the general pattern has been, yes, that the proportion of sickness and absence that is related to mental health has definitely increased. I suppose from my own perspective, anecdotally,
If I look back in the first 5 years between 2001, and that would have been within the civil service, occupational health, so the majority would have been musculoskeletal conditions, and I would say within 10 years after that, it had switched over to probably the majority was mental health.
When you say musculoskeletal, that's like someone with a sprained ankle who can't make it into the office, or a break of some kind, and that was the majority of sickness absence was because people had sprained an ankle or broken a leg and they weren't able to make it into the office. Now the majority is stress or anxiety or that range of stress up to,
I mean, I think that reflects across quite a lot of other working
workplaces,
environments.
definitely, of course, yeah.
Similarly, if you look at the HSE figures.
If you look at, so what information do you get, and I'm kind of straying into the next thing we're going to talk about, which is vacancies. Is there an interaction between the high numbers of vacancies and where people are taking, where there's persistent long-term sick leave, both at a departmental and by grade?
We don't have that information, Chair, but we could certainly have a look at that and provide you with an analysis of that. But it was, I suppose, in terms of feedback from our staff, that would be reported to us that increased levels of stress would be in areas where there would be significant vacancies. So that is
where
something
they feel they're doing multiple people's jobs and probably are. Yeah. Okay. I'll bring in others at this stage. Diane Forsyth.
Yep, thank you, Chair, and thank you all for coming here today to speak to this. With the rate that we have here in terms of civil service absence costing us is reported £44 million last year, and increasing. And I know the latest quarter shows down in the previous quarter, but it's actually up on the same quarter from last year. So it looks like we're just looking at another increase going forward. It is just really, really significant. And I just, you talk about getting into the detail of it, and I just want to bring it back to the fact that this is, it's people, and I'm just concerned with, I was in the public sector whenever we moved to centralised HR, and you've provided the structures and the numbers of the staff, and you've got some 500 staff in centralised HR, and I just was wondering in terms of the personalisation of the process, what would be your opinion as to, is there enough HR in each department dealing with the people hands-on that whenever they're going off sick?
I suppose importantly for us, it's the role of the line manager in terms of supporting staff, because they will probably be more generally aware of the personal circumstances or those other arrangements, and that's why we've tried to work with our line managers to upskill them as best we can, because they would be the front line in terms of ensuring that maybe staff don't go off in the first place. We also have our business partners aligned to the department, so again they will have that local intelligence and they work with the line managers from a HR perspective. So I think it's important that it's just the different layers of that, so don't necessarily think it's more HR staff in the departments. It's making sure that our line managers can spot those signs, they have the skills to do that, but then they refer appropriately into us when that's needed, and particularly in to our occupational health team. And again, one of the things that we've tried to do is standardise and streamline our process so that all of our staff across all of the departments are getting the same layer of service from us, because one of the pieces of work that we have initially done was just slightly different depending, and that was within our own team. So we've tried to standardise that so that all of our departments are getting the same level of service and all of our staff are being managed in the same way. But key for us is supporting our line managers who really do know those members of staff, to support them in their time of need and escalate them through to HR where appropriate.
And again, just to the same point, like it's people we're dealing with, and I would just be concerned that the civil service is so big in the standardisation of approach. Is that potentially what's not working here in terms of our increased sick leave, and different departments require a different approach, and the Chair had sort of touched on this. Do you do any analysis of your levels of sickness absence with what's actually going on in the departments? For example, where David had mentioned it, work-related stress, when you get into the detail of it, would you be doing an analysis as to workplace bullying or complaints that are coming through in department, hand in hand with work-related stress?
We do, and we work closely with our business partners who are aligned to the departments and looking at those hotspots, for example, and then we will correlate that information. So is there an increase in complaints, or there is an increase in indignity at work? And then we would bring a wraparound team, so involving occupational health, our employee relations team, as well as our learning and development team, to work with teams on the ground. So that's one of the things that we've implemented and introduced this year, Chair, in terms of looking at those specific areas. So you're right, one size doesn't fit all. And that was the reason why, again, anecdotally, we knew in terms of absence and stress, the issue with our staff who were bereaved, which is why we asked our staff, like, what are we not providing? What are the gaps? What should be provided? And that's why we then linked in with Partners in Crews to develop specific bespoke sessions for staff. So we had face-to-face sessions and we had online sessions. So that was as a direct result of asking our staff, like, what did they need and what did they feel we weren't providing enough of? So you're absolutely right. You know, standardisation and streamlining helps us, but that's also to ensure that we can then focus and tailor our intervention, that we are saying and doing it in the same way, but then we can tailor that and bespoke that depending on the needs of our staff.
What would be the process whereby, you know, I work for a department and I'm having a lot of HR issues. I've put in a lot of complaints. There's been complaints from other members for, you know, workplace bullying, and I'm often work-related stress. When that comes through to, you know, the HR department, and you look at that, you're talking about wraparound teams. What actually happens then? So what is the means whereby there's a group of staff, you know, in a particular department that are facing issues? What is the mechanism for them to get to approach a way to get that dealt with? What happens then?
And the mechanism, and I suppose with any of these situations, you know, we would want an informal, you know, management of that situation first. So, I mean, our business partners are aligned to the department, so they have that local knowledge and local understanding and are known to the department. So, I mean, first, if we were identifying that there were a range of issues, which has happened in a couple of situations, our business partners will go in and work with line managers to really do a bit of a risk assessment or an assessment in terms of, look, what are the needs, looking at the data we have in terms of absence levels, dignity at work or complaints or anything that's been raised, and then try to put an appropriate intervention. So that could involve learning and development support for managers. It could involve specific interventions and support from occupational health or our welfare team. So we will use that as an opportunity to tailor an intervention down that suits the needs of that department, to support all of our staff, both in the managers that are managing that, and there could be that something in terms of a formal HR process does come out of it, but our first approach will be if that's something that can be managed and dealt with and handled informally and locally with the staff in question.
Is there any reporting of that on a departmental level? So obviously you head up, you know, this team within, you know, the Shared Services Department of Finance, and so my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is, you know, you're picking these issues up, you're dealing with the business partners, so that's kind of all, you know, mid-level civil service grade. Yeah. But you know, at any point, is there a forum by which at senior civil service level you're going in to say, to, for example, the Department of Finance or Department of Economy, to say, do you realise you've got a pocket of HR issues here that's linked to sick leave? Is there a forum for that at senior civil service level?
And they're on a number of levels, so we would regularly meet with departments and bring some of that sort of statistical information with us, or the data that we have, and we are in the process of developing a number of dashboards that will help do that in a one-stop shop, I suppose. So that we can then identify with departments, like, we know if there's an issue, or, you know, your level of disciplinary cases is going up, and we can drill that down in that particular area, and then that will help us flag. So we will do that at a department level and go into department boards, and then we'll also do that and present that to next board. So those dashboards will help us really drive forward that and use that evidence base behind it.
And then would it be, you know, yourself that takes the lead in holding the other departments accountable for that?
In terms of flagging that up and working collectively with them, I suppose, and yes, holding them to account in terms of ensuring that there is compliance with HR policy and working with them to do so. But again, back to your point, it's ensuring that we're coming in from a supportive perspective and supporting our staff for whatever reason they may find themselves in that situation. But you're right, there's a transparency there in terms of us working with other departments, which is what we're trying to get to, specifically in relation to the creation of those dashboards.
Because, you know, like, it's just, there just is such a significant problem here, you know, and it's costing a lot of money. We have a lot of vacancies, and, you know, people are off sick as well, and, you know, just the common feedback you would get, like, I would have people coming to me as an MLA really concerned about, you know, civil service related queries and the complaints process coming through. When did you last, like, review the process by which civil service staff can make complaints?
There's an ongoing review of all, a range of HR policies. So again, we can certainly share with committee the schedule for that. So again, there's a continual review process. So there's quite a number of our HR policies that are due for review under and there's a significant programme of the review of HR policy, so we can find that specific information for you.
Yeah, no, that's good, and it's also good to see other pieces of legislation coming through. I know it has to be questions around. Now we've got the new leave in place for miscarriage, so that will take a degree of female gynecological leave out of this factor as well. Would you do any reviews of thematic sick leave to make any recommendations to other departments where there might be a need for legislation where it's maybe not genuine sick leave but something else?
And we would, and again, we would continually review that. And again, as I say, for example, some of the information in terms of baby loss. So we worked with Partners in SANS in terms of looking at, what help and could be provided there by way of support. So we continually look at that information, and whether it's through surveys or speaking with our staff or the different fora that we're involving our staff, or the establishment of the mental health forum. So it's trying to gather that information as much as we can to help influence how we deliver our service.
Oh, that's great. And you'd said to the chair that you'd be able to provide the committee with some data around the connection between sick leave and vacancies. I wonder, would you be able to provide us with some data around the sick leave and the complaints, from staff with regard to workplace bullying?
And certainly endeavour to see if we can.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Nicola Brogan.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks again, folks, for your briefing here this afternoon. I just have a couple of quick questions for you. I suppose, first of all, I'm not overly surprised, but it is still concerning, the number of staff absences because of mental health issues and stress and anxiety. But I suppose, as the Chair alluded to earlier, like pressures at work, they are and have increased over the years, and it's almost like a societal thing, but something that does need to be focused upon. Can you tell me exactly what you're doing to address stress and improve mental health issues, I suppose, within the civil service, please?
Do I bring Debbie in?
Yeah, certainly. We have a range of different measures to help support specifically mental health, well-being for all of our staff. And we take a sort of a multi-layered approach. So I can give you examples. For example, through our learning and development side of things, we have an online platform that staff can access training and development and different products there around, not just as individuals around their own mental well-being, and there's services there or training products around building resilience and dealing with stress, but also then as managers we have tools there around helping their staff to maintain their own good mental well-being, but also then when they're returning to work to support them in that regard. We also have our well-being programme, which is rolled out across all of the civil service. Again, that's an online platform that has loads of information about physical and mental well-being, supporting people to stay in work and stay healthy, but also then they can access that, if needs be when they're off. And we roll out a lot of programmes around focusing on health and well-being. We have road shows. We would focus particularly now on mental health issues around, again, resilience, dealing with stress, stress at home, financial well-being. We call in the services of the likes of the Charity for Civil Servants, who can provide a lot of support for carers and for people in financial difficulties. We also then obviously offer the employee assistance programme, so that's through Inspire, and that's where staff, whether they're in work or not, can avail of 6 sessions of counselling, and they can also get some specific therapeutic interventions there through Inspire too. So I suppose if you think about it in the round, there's quite a lot of products and information and activities that go on around trying to support our staff, whether they're in work or not, to maintain good mental health.
Right, they all should sound all very positive. What's the feedback like with them, what's the uptake like with them, and what's the feedback like as well from those that have used it? Do you know?
So I didn't mention, but we also have welfare officers there, in-house officers, who would go out and would make contact with staff, either if they need some help and advice when they're in work or when they're off sick. That consistently, that service gets a really high satisfaction rate. The Inspire gets good feedback. The other events as they happen, whether it's a wellbeing roadshow or an event, obviously we would issue evaluations after that, and it all consistently has good feedback. And obviously what we want to do is to continue to provide services where we get the good feedback, but look, on occasions when we maybe don't get such good feedback, to look at the reasons why, because we want to offer these services and products, you know, that are industry best practice and that we know will work, and we'll have an evidence base to show that they work. In terms of uptake, I don't have the figures, but I can find out for you the uptake of Inspire services and the uptake of the welfare officers specifically.
That'll be helpful. And just on that same point, how do you communicate that to staff that those services are available? Because very often people don't know that. I know even for ourselves as assembly members, there's services there which I didn't know until this week that we could actually, including Inspire, there's counselling services not there for assembly members I wasn't aware of. So how do you communicate that to staff so they are aware of it?
We do that pretty consistently, and we try to use different ways of doing that. So every department has an intranet site which is specific to that department, and we would take lots of opportunities to maybe highlight mental health, mental well-being, say for example World Mental Health Day, for example, in October, and anything that's coming up in the calendar like that, we would use those to issue an article to staff, and within that article then, as well as dealing with that maybe particular subject matter, whatever it might be, we'll always signpost all the sources of information that staff can go to. Likewise, when the WELL team or anybody else goes out and does roadshows, they will always bring leaflets. They'll always mention the general package of information that we have available to staff. So we take lots of opportunities like that to not just focus in maybe on one activity or one product, but to show the breadth of what we have out there for staff. We've actually just introduced in the last couple of weeks a line manager brochure, which pulls together lots of different things around signposting and information and policies and forms, and just as much information as we can for particularly new line managers, but actually be useful for any line managers around just generally, not just good mental health and the sources of support and how to manage sickness absence, but all the other elements of being a good manager, because obviously that will all play in then to reducing stress at work.
Okay, thank you for that. That does sound really positive. I wanted to ask as well if you have scoped out or done any research into the likes of a 4-day working week and the benefits that might have to staff and how it might reduce sickness, and the likes even how working from home has maybe reduced sickness and that, even in fact like with physical ailments and or physical sickness, you know, reducing the likes of viruses and bugs spreading throughout the office when people are working from home and that. So have you done any scoping out or research on either of those?
Nicola, no. I suppose just specifically in terms of the 4-day week, but I know there have been discussions and there's been sort of a lot of discussions around that, but we haven't in terms of that, but I recognise that that's definitely something that other industries are looking at. But, you know, I suppose we'll continually look at and research, and particularly the impact of hybrid working and, you know, our staff working from home, whether that's having an impact. But I suppose looking at our absence figures, you know, I think, and the flipping, you know, in moving away from MSK-related absences to mental health and stress-related, I think there's just probably even hybrid working may not necessarily be having, you know, the impact on that either. So it's definitely something to consider, but we just continue to try and analyse that as best we can.
That's fair enough. And just finally, you had mentioned in your opening remarks there about the Public Sector Occupational Health Forum. Can you give me a bit more information on that, please?
Yep, Nicola, so we recognise, I suppose, particularly from an occupational health perspective, and I know we mentioned the cost of absence within NICs, but I think in terms of the entire public sector, it's more than 100 million per year. So one of the things that we looked at was, you know, how can we work together collectively as a public sector set of organisations to particularly look at how we can learn from each other, how we can potentially share resource, because again, you know, when we are all sort of fishing, I suppose, back to the recruitment piece, from the same pond in terms of occupational health professionals. So, you know, from our medical staff, our nursing staff, ourselves, the trusts, EA, PSNI, we're all looking to recruit or utilise the same small and ever dwindling cohort of staff. So it was something that we took forward from an XHR perspective, just to gather together our colleagues from across all of those organisations to say, look, how can we work together? We've had a number of workshops across all of those sectors, and we've established 3 task and finish groups, one of whom is looking at occupational health as a career and looking at actually attracting people in to move forward within the occupational health service as their career, and look at how best we can do that. I mean, even in terms of commissioning places and looking at doing things jointly as opposed to all doing them separately as organisations. The second is actually looking at the training and support for our staff. So, for example, some of our organisations use occupational health technicians, some don't. Some of our public sector organisations have psychology services, some don't. So again, it's looking at how can we actually learn from each other and potentially look at sharing some of those really key resources for our staff. And the third task and finish group is looking at service improvement. So if an organisation across the public sector is doing something really well that we can all learn from, let's take the opportunity to do it. So the three groups then will report back to us as a collective forum. So, there's no lead as such. We are working absolutely as a collaborative so that we can look across each of those three areas, I suppose, to have that impact across all and support for all of our staff across the public sector. So that's where we've got to in terms of that. And I know David, just particularly in terms of the medical side of the house and the ever dwindling number of occupational health medical staff. Again, it just for it's reaching that point where we do need to work collectively together to try and address that.
Yeah. There's obviously a lot of work going on there, but listen, thank you. I appreciate that update, and thank you, Chair.
Okay. Steve Aiken.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the evidence so far. Sir, I've made a declaration of interest earlier on the committee, but I just want to re-emphasise it now. My questions are specifically going to be about the Northern Ireland Prison Service and the implications for sort of mental health and issues to do with stress related there as well. Can you tell me what percentage of the cases of stress and long-term stress are from the Northern Ireland Prison Service, please? That's the first question.
Just don't have it at hand, Steve, but just give. Well,
could you provide those, please?
Yeah.
In the pack, Steve. Yeah. It's in the. Do you want it for the purposes of your next question? But it's in there.
I think it's important because the levels of stress within the Northern Ireland Prison Service are significant, and the issues to do with it have been highlighted for a considerable period of time. And I welcome in the brief where we saw the fact that sort of there's been improvements in the process. But the question I have specifically is for previous members of the Northern Ireland Prison Service who did not have support to those facilities, and also in the past, very many members of the Northern Ireland Prison Service have felt that the support they were given, particularly from Northern Ireland Civil Service HR, was, to say the least, suboptimal. Is there any plans to review the process and what we can do to make sure that those people who in the past feel as if they've been disadvantaged are being dealt with appropriately and given the right level of support that they need?
I suppose, thank you, Steve, and we met with you previously to discuss that, and I suppose there's always an opportunity for learning in terms of moving forward, but we wouldn't be in a position to be reviewing cases of potentially of staff who've left, but there's definitely learning for us in terms of moving forward. And I know we and our team from occupational health have been out with prisons, really just looking at where our staff work and how best we can address that, and again across a number of areas, just to make sure that we are providing, where necessary, a bespoke arrangement depending on the working environment that our staff find themselves in. David, do you want to come in there on anything?
I'm not sure I have anything to add. I mean, there are well-established services for the staff in prison service. I guess from my point of view, an occupational health service, they need to get referred to us, and the situation is considerably better now than it was last year in terms of the likely turnaround time.
Is there a recognition within the Northern Ireland Civil Service, and particularly Northern Ireland Civil Service HR, is that there's been a significant problem with the Northern Ireland Prison Service, and both with the leadership and the management and indeed the support to the staff has left them feeling, but judging by the large numbers who've been in contact with me, have left them feeling as if they've been left out, and actually don't feel as if that anybody in the Northern Ireland Civil Service HR until recently, because I hope that has changed, has felt for their positions, and they feel as if they've been sidelined.
And look, Stephen, I hope that is an improving position, and I know in terms of your members feeding that back to you. So look, we have listened to you on a number of occasions, and we'd met to hear your views and act on those. So we're continually looking to improve. And again, anything you want to feed back to us separately, we're more than happy to look at. But I suppose, as we say, we have the bedded in team there within NIPS, and we're continually looking to see how we can review our service. And as I said, some of our staff going and actually, speaking to staff on the ground so that we can get a clear sense of what the needs are. So yes, there's a recognition we will always want to improve, and can we improve? Absolutely. And we want to do that, and we're committed to doing that.
I think, sort of, and Chair, with your indulgence, my final comment will be the fact that, representing my constituents and the people who have come to me, is that they've always felt that nobody really had much concern for the Northern Ireland Prison Service, because like in other parts of the United Kingdom, they were seen as being a separate service and were given support. Whereas in Northern Ireland, they were getting to be civil servants, but were never given the due regard for their service and their strenuous circumstances that they're in. I just want to make sure that A, that's on record, and B, that you recognise that they have been under severe stress. They have had a significant number of difficulties, and they do not feel as if they've been properly represented by Northern Ireland Civil Service HR. And I think that's something that we probably all need to work together to address.
Absolutely, and we're committed to work with you on that, Steve. And we've said that to you before, so I mean that commitment remains.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, team.
No problem. I think I'm right in saying, is it just for clarity? I think they are prison officers not civil servants in England and Wales, or are they Crown servants? I'm not sure. It's totally different. But in any case, okay, you put it on the record. Jerry Carroll.
Thank you. First one is a pretty elementary question. Just the breakdown in industrial posts. So there's DFC industrial, DFI industrial, NICS industrial. What are those job types?
It'd be road workers, or that. Are you talking specifically? List the type of, but it would be road workers,
forest workers, people working in the rivers agency.
So they will all be kind of manual type of jobs, the DFC, DFI, and the NICS,
Yeah.
Okay, just to note that obviously the absence levels tend to be higher compared with the other sort of non-industrial jobs, so just to note that. Just to kind of follow up on the Chair's point about the high levels of stress and anxiety and depression and other related illnesses for people being off. That's obviously quite stark, but in some ways not surprising given the scale of the mental health crisis that we have. I think somebody may have touched upon this earlier, but is this related to people maybe not being able to access a counsellor or a psychiatrist and a mental health practitioner, and therefore their sickness and their mental health is deteriorating? And also, is it connected to people doing 2 and 3 jobs? Because obviously since the redundancies in the public service maybe 10 years ago, I think it was, I'm hearing quite a lot of reports of civil servants doing the jobs of 2, sometimes 3 people, which would obviously make anybody stress. So are any of those 2 things coming up in your radar or in terms of your feedback?
Yeah, and Jerry, probably just all of the above, I suppose, in terms of that. And that's, why it's important for us to look at that multifaceted approach for our staff in terms of supporting them and the variety of reasons that they may find themselves in that situation. I suppose we would only sort of have control over our ability to refer our own staff internally or to provide staff with the service that we need to from an OC health perspective. And it reflected just in my initial brief that just in terms of the measures that we've put in place in enhancing the capacity within our own occupational health service, we've reduced our waiting times by about 75% and just actually getting our staff in. So our priority is to ensure that we're getting our staff within the necessary service and the necessary intervention as quickly as possible, because the earlier, as we all know, we get in and provide that intervention, the less likelihood there is then for that individual member staff to be off for a sustained period of time. So, and I suppose in terms of the future development of our service, we are looking at, psychology support. So we're looking at developing our service and increasing our capacity in a number of different areas. But I think you're right, there's just a number of reasons why our staff are absent as a result and mental health and stress related, anxiety related is the reason for that, and it's about us ensuring that we have different interventions to try and address those.
Thanks, and I'd be keen, as Nicola asked, for those figures about, I'm hoping every staff member knows about sort of the internal services, but presumably they don't, and there's maybe a missing group of people, or for whatever way of putting it, so we can get those figures through. Just a final question. I mean, in my view, it's often referred to, kind of look at the scale of illnesses and absences in the public sector, and that's compared to private sector. I don't think it's like for many reasons, but especially because there tends to be generally less protection for workers in the private sector. There tends to be stronger union representation and union branches in the public sector. So I mean, it's just a comment from me. I don't think we're comparing like for like. I don't think it's fair to do so, and it shouldn't be a race to the bottom to say, X amount of days on average a private sector worker takes off, and we should aim for that for a public sector worker. So I mean, that's just a general observation. I don't know if you have any comments on that, but I just don't think we're comparing like for like when that is introduced to the conversation.
Yeah, Jerry, I would agree, and I think sometimes that comparative exercise, we do need to ensure that we're comparing like with like, but notwithstanding any of that, we do recognise that we have an issue in terms of the absence levels of our own staff, I suppose regardless of the other comparators, and there could be some really good things that we could learn from other sectors, even, and including the private sector in terms of how we support our staff. So, I mean, you're right, and our concentration is not necessarily how we compare with others, whilst that's important. It's what we are doing to address the issue that we face in terms of our staff absence and supporting our staff.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I mean, I would also make the point that, I mean, I completely agree. It is definitely isn't a race to the bottom. I would like to see more unionisation in the private sector, particularly as where it isn't now. I don't think it's the case that and I think most of trade unions would want less absence, because that means a more contented workforce. I don't think we should be relaxed. I don't think the Northern Ireland Civil Service or any of us should be relaxed about the level of absence, because if our civil servants are that stressed, that anxious, and that we are losing £44 million a year, that isn't a good thing, whatever the reasons for it, and there will be multiple reasons. But that brings me on to the other question. Clearly part of the reason is the additional, and I have a couple of questions on this. If any other members do have questions on the vacancies point and on where we are with vacancies, I'll give people the opportunities, because we've thoroughly answered the questions on sickness. On vacancies, so we looked at the £44 million, which is, so £44 million is lost in terms of absence. That's the crystallisation of lost working days. Do we know how much is being unwittingly or unintentionally saved through carrying all these absences?
I wouldn't be in a position, not off the top of my head. Yeah, Chair.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that the question we're getting at is, and you touched on it earlier on, it is the view, Nix HR would accept that a contributing factor to the high levels of work-related stress, anxiety and absence are the high levels of unfilled vacancies.
It could be one of the contributory factors, and that is something that our staff are feeding back to us. So
whenever a number of years ago there was a capacity and capability review done by the NI Audit Office, and then subsequently was looked into by the Public Accounts Committee, which I suppose I should declare I was at that time on, and what they said was that there was effectively a need for transformation. There were questions about the age profile and the very high number of people who were over the age of 55. That's old these days, obviously, but but when you're a civil servant, it means you are likely to retire in the not too distant future. And there were multiple other points made. One of which was that the voluntary exit scheme operated in the kind of last decade was not, shall we say, diplomatically a raging success. Would you agree with that?
Well, I wasn't.
I'm not asking you whether you were culpable. I know you weren't in this role then, but I mean, the general impression is that the voluntary exit scheme kind of effectively made things worse. It got a load of people out of the system, and it civil servants left, but it didn't save any money. So it was kind of the worst of both worlds, because you lost headcount and talent, but you didn't really save very much money either. In fact, I think I'm right in saying it ended up costing money, but that could be. I'm happy to be corrected on that.
Yeah, I can answer that. So, Chair, I was actually the project manager for the voluntary exit scheme.
Then I'm glad you're here, Debbie, so you can disabuse me of all my incorrect statements.
We did save around about, if my memory serves me right, £90 million on the annual pay bill every year as a result of the around about 3,000 people who left the civil service.
Okay.
The upfront cost was, I think it was about 96 million in terms of the compensation payments, but then year on year we should have saved around about £90 million. So I would say that we did save money.
Okay.
I would also maybe suggest that the whole reason for that voluntary exit scheme in the first place wasn't to reposition our workforce. It was a blunt tool. It was to save. It was to help us to live within our budgets, given the financial position that we were in at the time.
Well, I'm glad you clarified that for me, Debbie, and fair play to you for doing it. But can I also ask, do we think that some of the 44, if we think that some of the 44, certainly, but it is still the case, I think that the NIAO's judgment is that a large number of the people who left have kind of recycled back, some not large, but a significant portion of them have recycled back into the civil service or public service generally through in contractor roles. I think that's fair to say. There have been, a lot of those people have, a significant number of them are...
I wouldn't have any information on that.
I mean, I think I've had that, but because I can't quote it because it's in front of me, but I have had, I'm sure I've read that elsewhere, but I don't want to be accused of making up statistics, so I won't pursue that line. But in terms of the voluntary exit scheme, it is one of the things that has driven the high level of vacancies. That is structurally, that's because we had the voluntary exit scheme and a significant 3,000 or 4,000 people leaving. We've never quite caught up. Is that fair to say since then?
I suppose over the last number of years, Chair, because of the budgetary situation that we found ourselves in, we haven't been in a position to fill vacancies, and even over the last 2 years since I've been in post, we've had a number of different reprioritisation exercises. So I suppose, over the last year, we've specifically concentrated our efforts on key posts, for example, within the Northern Ireland Court Service, in terms of Windsor Framework, specifically professional technical posts. So we haven't been filling our general service posts. So again, really the budget situation has been driving for us a slowing down of recruitment in some areas, and that is exacerbating the situation in terms of levels of TPs and the ability for departments to fill some of those vacancies on a permanent basis. So, but again, departments need a budget to fill those vacancies, so it's just that had been that continuous thread over the last couple of years in managing budgets and looking at vacancies and delivering services. So departments are constantly in a state of struggle and flux on that, and that. So it's been a raft of reasons that has contributed to the vacancy situation. But I know from our perspective over the last couple of years, there have been a number of pauses to recruitment and specifically targeting priority vacancies, and we've been working with the departments to identify what those are. So that in itself, by prioritising some vacancies and slowing down our recruitment because of the budgetary challenges, has in effect then had that impact on other departments who haven't been able to fill some of those vacancies.
Okay, I'm going to bring in other members now. Owen Tennyson.
The previous sickness, we just
you didn't get in the previous sickness? Owen?
It's on the previous item, if that's all right.
That's
Chair,
fine.
or sickness absence, and it's just following up on questions from the Deputy Chair in relation to self-certification. Just for my own understanding, and apologies if you have broached this already, Catherine, what actually is the process for self-certification for absence? So is that an email, or is that,
It's a specific document, so it's completed by member staff and submitted to their line manager with the reasons why. So.
Okay, so it does go directly to their line manager. Okay, and is that a digital process?
Well, it can be emailed, or if staff don't have access to that, or can't be printed off or posted in. So whatever way that staff can do that.
Okay. No, it was just to clarify that for my understanding. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Diane, Deputy Chair. I think.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And on the level of vacancies, so whenever we're seeing the budget reports coming through, the level of vacancies are always cited as like a saving. So I just was wondering, is there a process by which in HR you're reviewing how long a vacancy exists for, and a review of whether there still is a role there, or has the department, reprofiled, or is it, are we just declaring a saving every year for a role that has been compensated for by something else?
And I suppose from a vacancy perspective, departments manage their vacancies, Diane, so we recognise vacancy when it comes through to next HR for us to actually fill it and run a competition. So vacancies within departments we wouldn't have sight of, because as you say, for a variety of reasons, they may not be wanting to fill a vacancy. There could be reprofiling, there could be restructuring, or they just don't have the budget to fill that vacancy. So centrally we don't hold that information. So the vacancies that we classify as vacancies are ones that we've had from departments and we're actually running a competition for. So different departments will have a different rationale, a different reason for the number of vacancies that they will have and the reasons that they will have those vacancies.
Sort of sits more in the organisational
departments.
departmental role rather than your central role. No, that's grand. In terms of temporary promotions across the civil service, what is the process or the rules around that?
I suppose in terms of temporary promotions, departments would put them in place for a variety of reasons, and I suppose by the very nature they should be on a temporary basis, and it could be to fill or to undertake a special project that's time bound for maternity leave, sickness absence, or that they just don't have the budget to fill something on a permanent basis. So the process would be then managed within the departments in terms of whether it's an expression of interest or whatever way, but it's conducted in line with what we would expect in terms of HR procedures and in line with the merit principle. Debbie, do you want to?
So for example, within a department, there's vacancies sitting there, and who makes the decision that we're going straight to temporary promotion rather than an external recruitment there?
The department would make that assessment. So
but based on what? Like what's the rules or guidance there?
It would be based on their own. So the reason why the vacancy has arisen in the first place. So it would be for the departments to make that assessment. So whether there's affordability, or if it's a short-term position that they needed filled, or if it was a special project. So departments will make that assessment whether they want to fill something on a temporary basis and make that assessment.
You think that's good, HR process, that someone's deciding to go temporary promotion rather than open recruitment? Because surely if you go open recruitment, you're getting the best candidate, internal or external, because internal can go for that.
I suppose you wouldn't want to go to open recruitment, because generally we would recruit on a permanent basis. With the temporary promotions, really, the reason for them to be in place should be to fill a substantive vacancy, so a permanent vacancy on a temporary basis. So for example, because somebody's off on long-term sick or maybe off on maternity leave, the expectation being that it would be filled permanently in due course, the temporary promotion plugs that gap.
What would be the guidance of a time period that's temporary? Less than a year? Like is there a defined time period on that?
I mean, our expectation and good practice would suggest up to a year, but in exceptional circumstances that may be increased. And look, we have been providing departments with an update in terms of the numbers of TPs that are across all of the departments and the length of time that those have been in place. So, I mean, our position would very much be that they should be on a temporary basis, but for whatever reason and in exceptional circumstances, departments may extend that. But again, if it's a permanent post, we would expect, and there's funding for that to be filled permanently, that would come through us then for a competition on it.
What sort of numbers would you have across the board of temporary promotions that have lasted for more than a year?
Just bear with me. Yep, so we have, there's around across, next, and this was at the end of September, so there's about 2,792 temporary promotions. So, I mean, I can share that breakdown.
More than 10% of the entire civil service?
Yeah.
That's the total temporary promotions?
Yeah.
That's not how many are over a year?
Over a year, there's 683 from 1 to 2 years, 2 to 4 years, 530, and over 4 years, 177.
And do you do a quantification of that, of the additional cost to the civil service of the temporary promotion?
We could do, and I suppose that it would be weighed up against what the purpose of that temporary promotion was in the first place. So again, that would be reviewing, for example, those over 1 year in terms of, and again, there's from our HR Connect perspective and on the system, there's a variety of reasons then that managers would log as to why that post is filled on a temporary basis. So anything from a temporary promotion change. So for example, if there's a temporary promotion in a management position, invariably sometimes that leads to other temporary promotions for that backfill piece. or as a result of leave, maternity leave, sick leave, a special exercise, or a vacant post. So there's a variety of reasons why departments would put that temporary arrangement in place.
And then would the review, management, interception and that, would that fall to yourselves then in HR? So for example, would you be feeding back to them to flag this is a really long temporary promotion? Is there a period at which you would ask them to go to open recruitment on that? Because there's just some very substantive civil service posts, well-paid posts that are sitting temporary under this temporary promotion for a long period of time, and it's effectively blocking people from the outside getting into the civil service at that grade.
And I suppose, and again, it's part of the information that we will share with the dashboards, and that is the temporary promotions and their numbers. But again, the decisions, and it is for us to flag that to them, but it is for departments to assess the reasons why those individuals are in those temporary promoted positions for a period of time, any longer than a year. And as you say, just if there is an exercise to be run in terms of a permanent basis, then that's at that point. But for some of those, for example, sick leave or maternity leave, they will be temporary because that individual will be coming back. So it'll be for the departments to make that assessment.
And I read somewhere this week, may have been in the press, but there was somebody on temporary promotion, something like 18, 19 years. Is that correct?
That is correct, but that's now been resolved.
Okay. No, that's grand, because those stories aren't helpful to
I know.
anyone, and it's not really what the perception that we want to see of our Northern Ireland civil service out there. I want to see open and transparent recruitment and getting the right people in the jobs. Thank you.
It's also a thing for the people who are temporarily promoted. It's not good for them either. As someone who I remember being temporarily promoted for a while and being frustrated, because if you're trying to get a mortgage or have some other a loan or have some other reason that you have to certify your income or your job with somebody, that becomes a problem. I presume all the statistics that we've been looking at in relation to absences relate to the substantive grades. So if someone is reporting absence, are we getting that bias? So all the stats on how many people are long-term sick at an administrative grade or a grade 7 or whatever, S8, whatever it is, are we getting that by substantive grade? As in, are there people if someone is reporting someone's on long-term sick for 6 months, do they show up in the statistics as their substantive grade or their temporarily promoted grade?
I'll double check that for you, Charles.
I think that would be useful.
Yeah.
Given more than 10, getting one for 15% of the entire Northern Ireland civil service is on temporary promotion, I think that would be statistically relevant. And I think there's also surely a bit of statistical analysis looking at whether people on temporary promotion are more likely to be on long-term sick, because that's a double problem. If somebody is both temporarily promoted and on long-term sick, that's I imagine a complete handling in terms of management, because they might have responsibilities that are not being seen to, and there's no way. It just seems. Is there I'll bring you into the second, Paul, through. But is there a target or a strategy for sort of reducing the number, like for getting to, it'll never be zero, but like radically reducing by, 2 years or 2030, the number of temporary promotions?
I suppose, and it has been well rehearsed this week, we made a commitment that that we would continue to do that. But again, there's so many contributory factors to that. So if we're not filling vacancies, that that in terms of, because we don't have the budget to do that, then that's having that effect of maintaining and sustaining some of those temporary promotions. So
we know there's going to be a draft 1 year budget by the end of this year. We know the executive has the opportunity to produce a multi-year budget next spring. Would it be a good action for the department to say, we need now to get a grip on this, or we need to have a hard, cold, blunt look at these level of temporary promotions and I just wonder, given there is going to be a multi-year budget, there's going to be people that know what their limits, and so you'd say, well, look, let's reconcile this, let's be honest about what we can do and can't do. I don't know whether that's being planned for.
Any day, and there has been recent discussions about that with departments. So again, it's a collective responsibility, Chair, in terms of, because of departments and us all working together to do that. So again, we can very much flag that and support that. And do what we can do, for example, in terms of sickness absence. So if that is a reason why there's a temporary promotion, then the measures that we're putting in place with sickness absence and managing that will alleviate that. So there are levers we have, I suppose.
You could set a target, or the finance, in the finance permanent secretary or the minister could write out to accounting officers and departments and say, you have your budget. You have, say, by next spring, hopefully there will be we'll be closer to getting multi-year budgets out to 2028, will it be, or 2026?
First 2 years and then
first 2 years
after that.
So at that point, theoretically, the minister or the permanent secretary could write to accounting officers, i.e. permanent secretaries in other departments, or HR directors in other departments, and say, you have a multi-year budget, or you will have a multi-year budget. What is your plan for getting your number? And I know communities, for example, is a particularly high level there, but writing to either that minister or that accounting officer and say, that's a power that could happen, and say,
the individual accounting officers would have the responsibility for the management of their departments in terms of that, but I suppose our role is to ensure that any of those contributory factors that are adding to the increase in temporary promotions, that's I suppose the lever we have from the Department of Finance in terms of supporting that piece, which will help drive down temporary promotions and help departments to do that.
But it can be next. There's nothing preventing it from being a next HR policy to get down the number of temporary promotions. Is that there's no legal prohibition on you guys setting a target, or no? Even if the target isn't in law, or you don't have
I'm not sure that we could set a target. And again, look, from a policy perspective, we can double check that for you. But I suppose the accounting officer has that responsibility. But our role is to ensure that any of those factors that are adding to that.
Yeah, at balance, it just feels a bit like there's no. What's the point in having an XHR central function if they can't focus energy and drive performance and outcomes? And it feels a little bit like we have this huge structural problem. More than 10% of the entire civil service is on temporary promotion, and if there's no real way of driving towards a specific outcome, that feels like a problem, to be really honest, because how does it ever get solved if it's kind of like, well, we just wait and we'll see what the permanent secretaries do? I'll leave that one with you and bring in Paul through at this point.
Yeah, just on that, so you must be content with the levels of temporary promotion.
No, I wouldn't be content, because again, it's. I mean, as we said, it's not an ideal situation. Now, temporary promotions, are useful to cover, short-term arrangements for whatever reason, but it wouldn't be something that we would necessarily be content with. Which is why we're looking at, any way that we can address. But I suppose in terms of any of those temporary promotions that are filling vacant posts, the budgetary situation is something that is driving that.
It's just, I would agree with the chair that there should be a set goal. There should be a set goal to reduce, but there should also be an understanding as to what level is acceptable. I suppose that's my next question. What level is acceptable?
I don't know that this is a straightforward answer to that, but I suppose the level that is acceptable is to cover any special exercises that the temporary promotions are designed to cover, or maternity leave. So, that would be, and I can't put a number on it, but I suppose for me it's wherever we have levers to make a difference or a dent into that, the numbers of temporary promotions, that when we're over and above that, that's where I would have the concern. So for me, the temporary promotions, I recognise that they're not where they should be, but there are a lot of contributory factors to that we can try and do something about.
And if we were to get to a point where we knew what an acceptable level is, we probably could all be content with that, because temporary promotion brings flexibility. Mm-hmm. And I suppose what's concerning me is that we don't know what that level should be. And I think there's a job of work to be done in order to drive temporary promotions down and vacancies down to what should be acceptable levels. But we won't know that, or that won't be achieved, if we don't know what acceptable looks like. I'll leave it there. I looked at this graph, table 2, on page 609 of our packs, and I thought, my goodness, DUP Minister's really making a real difference here, because he's increased vacancies by 1,051 in the 1 year with regards to communities. And then I realised that no, these are just new jobs. So is there a breakdown? So at the minute we've got 3,735 vacancies. Last year we had 1,951. So that's an increase of 1,784, just to place it on the record. Do we have a breakdown of new jobs? Because I don't class new jobs as vacancies. And I think that when you look at this figure, it's probably being unfair to the civil service with regards to the vacancies. I can clearly see that in the Department of Communities, a lot of this is, if you like, subcontracted from the Department of Works and Pensions, and they will have says we need 500 new posts based in Ballymena, based in Belfast, whatever, and so that's how you're getting that figure. But is there a breakdown between genuine vacancies and new jobs created?
But I'm sure we could certainly look into that for you. I mean, there has been a significant recruitment this year within communities on the DWP contract, so, and moving to substantive staff as opposed to agency-based staff as well. So, I mean, we can certainly look to see if we can provide you more detailed analysis.
I think it's important because, you know, the headline there is, you know, nearly 4,000 vacancies in the civil service, and that's not correct because a lot of that's new jobs which haven't been filled yet. That leads, you know, there's issues there about speediness of recruitment, which is a different issue. I suppose the one that's in-house is the DAERA and the amount of posts that they have created to implement the Windsor framework. Who makes the decision as to how many jobs are required?
That would be for DAERA, so the accounting officer and the senior leadership team within DAERA.
Right, okay. And each accounting officer will be best placed to know how many jobs they need for their function?
Yeah.
And you don't have any say in that, or the Department of Finance doesn't have any say in that, other than probably the Department of Finance with regards to budget?
Whether, yeah, and the allocation of budget will have a direct impact in terms of the decisions that accounting officers make, I suppose.
Yep.
So.
When you have a temporary promotion, where is the vacancy there? Is the vacancy at the promoted post, or is the vacancy at the post where the person has risen up from?
More than likely to be at the post the person's temporarily promoted into.
That's where the vacancies. Yeah. Is there a clear correlation? If I was to look at a line graph of vacancies and then also temporary promotions, would I see a correlation?
You probably, yeah, because again, I suppose we've 1,288 staff temporary promoted into areas where they're basically temporary promoted into a vacant post. So, yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So if you tackle the temporary promotion piece, vacancies, genuine vacancies come down. So it solves both problems.
Yes. But I suppose departments need the budget to enable them to commit to those permanent long-term vacancies or filling of those posts. So that's the dilemma, I suppose.
I'll leave it there. Chair, are you going to go on to the recruitment?
I think we're on that now. So if you want to ask stuff on that.
Can I ask just on the electronic interview process, for want of a better word, and I've lost my place here, 606, where we have received complaints about the process of interviews remotely, and the vast number of people who were able to be interviewed in a relatively short time, which is a really good thing, but the levels then of people who were discontent or complaint about the process. Given the speed, given the amount of people that you were able to interview, and it's bound to have saved a lot of money. First of all, how much money did it save? And second of all, is there any scope for an appeals process, given you've saved money and time?
I suppose there is an appeals process during that, Paul, and any candidate who had written to HR Connect during that open window where folk were enabled to complete their interview, if they highlighted at that stage they were encountering issues, then that was done on a case-by-case basis. But I suppose once the interview window closed, then the appeals process at that stage wasn't open to them. The only then subsequent avenue they would have had in terms of making a complaint was through the normal complaints process, and we had about 210 individuals did complain through that route for a variety of reasons. I suppose I don't have the cost savings, I suppose, and I certainly can look and see if we can help quantify that. But I suppose even in terms of the process would normally take about 12 to 16 weeks, whereas that was able to be done within that 4-week window. So it's just a different way of looking at new technology and trying to speed up the recruitment process.
I actually support the concept. I actually think it's a really good idea because you can interview more people, and you know, albeit being remotely, the time that would be saved in this is, to me, incredible. So I do like the concept. It's just making sure that it's robust enough that nobody is treated unfairly.
Yeah, and I suppose, and for us, it also, particularly in terms of people's circumstances, they can undertake it at their leisure, I suppose. But look, and as I said before, we want to learn from all of these new initiatives that we're taking forward, and particularly in relation to the pre-recorded interview. So we have reviewed that and we have looked at the outcomes, and we involved our Central Trade Union colleagues in providing us with feedback. So they worked with us through a mock interview process, and we wanted their feedback and asked for their feedback, which they provided. So we enhanced the guidance, we enhanced certain aspects of it, and results. So there was 210 complaints in relation to phase 1, but in phase 2, candidates experience technical issues decreased from 13% to about 4%. So again, we want to absolutely use new technology and new ways of doing things, but we also want to learn from that and learn from the feedback that we're receiving from any complaints or from
Is this
users.
now routine recruitment process using this technology, or are some departments quicker at others of moving over to it?
No, so it was specifically used for administrative officer posts. So again, it wouldn't be, and what we want to make sure is that some of the new technologies and new approaches aren't a one-size-fit-all. So we did use that for DFC colleagues. We have now recently gone out for the broader administrative officer competition for NICs using the same technology, and we've had, I think, up to 10,000 applicants for that too. So again, we're in the process now of rolling that out with the enhanced guidance and with the enhanced support. So we will use it for that grade of staff, but may not necessarily be appropriate for others. So again, we'll just continually look at different ways of doing things and reviewing them and seeking feedback as we're moving along, listening to complaints.
The technology providers, Fujitsu, am I right?
No, that was the platform. It wasn't. They hosted it, but they weren't the provider of the software.
They didn't provide software. Hosted it in what sense? They didn't provide the software platform. No. What did they provide?
They would have provided the link for candidates, so it's part of the recruitment process. So they would email you a link, then you click on the link, and it goes into the separate software provider.
Fujitsu didn't provide the software on which you did the interview, but they emailed you the link.
Because they provide, so it's because they manage the logistics of that process for us. So yes,
it's the HR Connect.
HR Connect. Yeah.
It's they who provide HR Connect. And just so we're clear, on that, where is that contract at the minute? Is it up for renewal? Has it been renewed with Fujitsu?
We're in the process of procurement for our new systems replacements, Chair. So that's an ongoing process at the minute.
For HR Connect?
Yes.
So just so I understand, Fujitsu is the main technology supplier partner for HR Connect, and has been for how long?
Since 2007 or so. Yeah.
2007. When does that contract? When is it due to run out?
I think it's 2026.
Yep.
Okay. And is it Integrate that's supposed to take over at that point?
Yeah.
And obviously, I know there's a question about who is bidding to do the Integrate service, but currently, just to be clear, Fujitsu is contracted to be the technology platform for NIC's HR Connect until spring 26.
26, 27. Again,
okay.
So
when was that renewed? At what point was that renewed?
It was renewed last year.
Was it renewed after an open competitive tender? Do you know?
It was an extension to the current contract.
Okay, and it was and the decision was made simply to roll it over because that was more straightforward, or was there any discussion around a competitive tender?
We're in the process of that at the minute, Chair, in terms of the broader systems and replacement. So we're in the midst of that process.
Was the decision, if it was renewed in whatever it was, last year or the year before.
I'll just
Yeah,
confirm
it would just be
the
helpful to know
exact-
if there was a specific decision made that. So I think it would be helpful to have clarity, and that was the decision made just to roll over the Fujitsu contract until a full procurement for Integrate, because it's sort of easier and quicker that way. Or was any discussion given to, because that was obviously post Horizon, for example, was there any discussion given to migrating it in the meantime? I think it would be just helpful to understand.
We can certainly get you a response to that, Chair.
Okay.
But it would be normal in terms of the extension to contracts. So
I'm aware contracts are regularly extended in the Northern Ireland Civil Service, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't ask about the context which they're
Well, we can get you a
that would be
response
helpful
to
just to
that,
understand the decision points around that and the timing. And there's a few other bits I think that we probably, I've now forgotten some of them, but there's a few bits. One of them is, we'll go back to you on them. If no other members have indicated they wish to ask a question, can I thank you very much for answering a whole range of questions. Thank you, Debbie, for sharing your experience of voluntary exit scheme. You know, I have the opportunity to voluntarily exit this committee, which is really useful. You can stay if you want and listen to us, listen to the rest of her. You've probably had enough. There are several things we need to follow up on. There are, I think, persistent concerns around. I appreciate that there are good intentions there, but we are, I think there are real concerns about high levels of persistent, obviously long-term absences, but also the high levels of unfilled vacancies. And I think the committee will continue to be looking at it, and we hope to be able to support you. But obviously we want to see some kind of positive momentum and clarity of purpose in that direction. And I hope the next time we're talking to you, we can talk about some of that. But thank you very much in the meantime.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, members, we are just going to suspend for a couple of minutes to have a brief chat, and then we'll go back into open session after that.
Stephen,
Do we need to press the button?
Do I think we need to go into closed session?
we just need to press the button.
Senate Chamber. Sound. 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 Senate Chamber.
Yeah, thanks. We had previously requested an oral briefing on the role and work of the Government Accounts Branch. We have heard from them before, but a departmental briefing paper was provided in advance of today's session. It's at page 674. Welcome to the meeting and thank you for being patient because we have kept you waiting. Stuart Stevenson, who's the Treasury Officer of Accounts, Joanne Warnick, who's Head of Government Accounts Branch of the Department, and Heather Robinson, who is Deputy Head of Government Accounts Branch. Thank you very much, folks. Stuart, would you make an opening statement for us?
Chair.
We'll ask questions. Obviously, members can indicate if you wish to ask a question.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon and welcome to the committee members. Thanks for the opportunity to come here today. We are the management team really in terms of the Government Accounts Branch, and we would play out the key role in terms of cash management around the Northern Ireland Consolidated Fund. We sit within Accountability and Financial Management Division within Public Spending Directorate in the department, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Joanne Warnick, who's the head of the branch, and the deputy head Heather Robinson. Between the three of us, we have probably 30, maybe 40 years experience in public spending. So
you don't need to labour all that. What's another year?
Yeah. And we're all accountants as well. So.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I mean, I think a part of what we had discussed before is the role of the accounts branch in terms of keeping the department and other people right, but also in a sense managing cash flow. We talked a little bit about I think we talked a bit about some of the improvements to how in the legislation, which the name now escapes me, in the previous mandate, which also included reporting. I think was there a change in that was, or am I mistaken?
Sure, you may be thinking about the work that's going on in the Financial Provisions Bill.
Maybe,
because it
but
touches
explain that to me.
on some of the work, and in particular looking to the future in terms
Okay.
of taking an advance on the consolidated fund.
Yes, okay. Yeah, I don't think that is what I was thinking of, but explain that to me.
Okay, yeah, Chair. The Financial Provisions Bill is being taken forward by our colleagues from Supply Division, are leading on it.
Yeah.
Patrick Neeson, I think, has been to the committee before.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
one of the elements that they're looking at introducing as part of that bill is to increase the tolerance levels in terms of the advances on the consolidated fund. At the minute, there's a limit. It's
Yes.
2% of the previous year's vote, which kind of sets the bar for us in terms of issuing advances to departments when they need it. The bill, I think, is looking at lifting that from 2 to 4%, which would provide us with a little bit more flexibility, which we think is good sense. And certainly, it's 21-22, Chair, I think we got close to our limit or right at it in terms of the amount of advances we could issue. But even, I think this year's a good example, you know, with the additional funding that's been issued through October monitoring. You know, normally 2% is around 470, 480 million. But you can see from the amount of money that we've now been reallocating to departments, it's over and above that, you know. So we would anticipate some pressure depending on the timing of the spring supplementary estimates and the budget bill that flows from that. In terms of getting, you know, we can't issue anything until the final stage when Royal Assent goes through. So that moving from 2 to 4 would seem like a sensible option, I think, at this stage, and give us that added flexibility.
And would that kick it to the financial provisions bill? We haven't seen it yet. We're hoping that it'll be. I think it was initially due to be published this year. I think looks unlikely it's going to be published this year.
Provisions. We've seen the outline, but we, as you say, the time scale has slipped.
So it's unlikely to be useful in this financial year. I assume it'll be. The earliest would be 25, 26, no, 26, 27, probably before it was. Actually, will give you the legal ability to approve quicker or larger cash advances.
Absolutely, I think. 24, 25 would be the, 25, 26, Chair, as you say. I think that's a fair assumption. That would be probably the most likely year that we could avail of that added flexibility if we needed to.
And one final question for me before bringing on. So, in terms of, there's obviously a relation. You're at the kind of the acute end of the budget process, as in the acute practical end of the cash management of the consolidated fund and ensuring that money gets out promptly and the departments are managing their own cash flow properly and that the literal accounts are being properly managed. And that is that's at the kind of downstream end of the budget process and the strategic political decisions, the allocations made at executive level, the debates in the Assembly, and then the cash allocation. In what way? I mean, it might seem an odd question to ask. Clearly, for a number of the 4 or 5 of the years of the past 7 or 8 years, we haven't had a normal budget process because there hasn't been an executive and assembly here to disperse, to agree allocations. Does it make your job easier to have one here? In which does it make it less chaotic? I suppose is what I'm asking. Does a more consistent supply process lead to better cash management?
Absolutely, Chair. I think in terms of the advances on the consolidated fund, essentially there are 3 kind of periods of the year or situations that we would have to deal with. One is where departments approach the exhausting their vote on account in the first half of the year. And then the second period, which is particularly, and I would think that's where this winter will be worth keeping a close eye on, where we've got the spring supplementary estimates and getting that through the legislative timetable. So when things move well for us, it certainly helps us anticipate when we're going to hit those pinch points. But it's something that we have built our experience and the kind of modelling that we would do in advance to kind of look at the timetable. But certainly when the institutions are up and running and the legislative process is flowing, it certainly helps. And I think this summer is a great example, you know, when obviously with the restoration causing some delays around what would be the usual budget timing, and then of course the election being called, the general election timing really pushed back our normal Royal Assent. in routine years, we would see that main budget bill coming through, usually Royal Assent around the middle of July.
Okay.
But so
It's an improvement. I'm going to bring colleagues down for a second first.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for coming here today. Special hello to Joanne. In small world of Northern Ireland accountancy, you never know where you'll come back across people again. But no, good to see you all. I just wanted to ask in terms of the forecast, and so you're obviously sitting at the central level and you're taking the feedback from the other departments. So as we're sitting centrally here in our finance committee, we're taking feedback on the feedbacks of different departments in terms of budget and things like that. What's your assessment of just the quality of the forecasting that's coming in from all of the different departments?
Yeah, we ask for projections, and we would get a bank of information from departments on the 8th working day of each calendar month, and that will give the projection for the next full month. So on the 8th of December, we will get the January cash flow predictions from those departments. I think.
Is it just for 1 month, Stuart? Or is it out to the end of the year? So are they just saying this is what I'll need in the next month, or are they providing you an annual? Here's where we think that we're going to need cash over the year.
Yeah. Well, certainly we would we take the daily for each day of that month. But certainly in terms of then the future months, we would be asking departments to look ahead and in particular reprofile in light of significant changes. So for example, the additional funding from October monitoring has to be factored in, like sort of a pay settlement. It's also an opportunity for them to reprofile. But for us, our focus is very much on that kind of next 6 to 7 weeks. Because we use that information to feed into the Northern Ireland office, who then put it into Treasury's cash management system.
Would you be getting, good quality and timely returns from all the departments in terms of that?
Additionally, yes, we would get timely responses, and I would have to say, looking back over the information, it's fairly good. Some departments are more proactive, I think, in this area than others, and they're anticipating some of the issues that we're seeing. And sometimes when we go out to them to say, look, you may have a cash flow issue here 2 months from now, quite often we're seeing that those departments are reading the situation well, and that encourages us, I think. I don't think it's a major issue for us at this stage.
Yeah, it's just, it's good to know that departments are recognising their own cash flow pressures rather than you having to chase them on that, because obviously you're holding huge amounts of money, and in the public sector person, you're trying to get the best return on investment. So if you're going to have a lot of money that you're holding it for a long period of time, you can get better investments in terms of money market returns or whatever way you're banking that there. Whereas if they're coming to you all of a sudden and needing money, it doesn't really help you maximise that.
Yeah, we work on a day-to-day basis in terms of the cash flow. So for example, we have to make a decision just before midday every day in terms of what we're going to draw down from Treasury, and we need to notify Treasury at that point. Now we do have an opportunity if something emerges from the blue and we need more cash, but there are costs involved with that, so we're always very keen to make sure we get it right first time. So that's where the collaboration is so important to us. I think as well, for us, in terms of managing the pool, we look at the balance overall and the cash requirements that we're going to have that night, what our anticipated receipts are going to be. But for us, it's more about security on that funding when we're making the decision about the overnight investment, as opposed to the return that's going to deliver. But as interest rates have bubbled up over the last couple of years, we are seeing more income coming in terms of interest. I think last year was about $500,000, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So
it's currently about $1 million this year.
Yeah.
So, well, that's good to see. A significant increase.
It is indeed, and that relieves the pressure on us in terms of the cash flow elsewhere as well.
Does that go into DOF, or where does that money go? Does that sit with yourself in the pool?
The income earned, we would first of all use that interest to offset against any other kind of banking fees or charges that emerge, and then the residual amount then is ciphered off into the consolidated fund.
Okay, and then so in terms of the advances, something that we've sort of raised at committee before, where it's largely, you know, just peaks and troughs, but, you know, in cash flow demands, and it's not actually something, you know, that's particularly urgent. It's just, you know, the timing of, you know, budget acts and things going through. Whenever we move forward and hopefully see multi-year budgets, whenever a multi-year budget is set for, say, a 3-year period, does that mean then that'll cover you for that whole period, that you would be expecting you shouldn't be having these advances in that block?
Well, the multi-year budgets will help departments in terms of planning, and that should lead to improvements in terms of their forecasting. The annual vote for each budget bill will still set the control totals, so we should still see elements occasionally of departments needing that advance. You know, we give some of the information we've shared with the committee. You can see from some of the graphs that we had great fun drawing those up. We hope that helps a little bit. But you can see quite often some of the departments, it's a fairly steady kind of cash flow, with those peaks coming through very much in terms of agriculture stands out for us in terms of the timing around the single farm payments at the start of September. So, you know, we expect those issues to remain. And for some of the departments that depend on income, for example, the utility regulator is a great example. And every year they generally run out of cash around the summer. And we need to help them out at some point before they start to get their income in through the sort of autumn and winter months. And that regularizes that, and they're able to repay it. So we think those issues will remain the case. But when we get steady cash flows and the incremental element building year on year, when there's a significant step in terms of funding, and maybe with fiscal framework, that will improve in years to come as well. So it will remain an area of focus and attention for us. But hopefully
and finally,
that helps.
just Chair, is there anything, you know, in terms of the Work Government Accounts branch that you think would be of interest of this committee to pick up as a piece of work to look into, or anything that you think we could do to support?
Well, certainly we can give some thought to that. I think, you know, at the moment we have a relative level of confidence about our key outputs. You know, we've a fairly clean audit report every year, which helps. Our last internal audit report was satisfactory. We have embraced any recommendations that we've had over the years. I think it's helpful that we've had the opportunity now to talk a couple of times to the committee about it, and you know, because maybe it doesn't quite get the focus and attention that the level of funding probably reflects. So it's good accountability, I think, to be here, but we do have a good team in place. We have a lot of experience, and generally we're proud of our outcomes, and we hope that will continue to be the case in the future. We do take it very seriously. It's a key control as part of the public expenditure system. So hopefully that will be the case. But thank you very much for the
fruit. Yeah, so the question that Diane asked around the multi-year budgets, you have answered it, I think. But just so you must still work on an annual cycle for consolidated fund. It's not a multi-year budget for 3 years doesn't mean that you can basically upload somebody's consolidated fund payments in the first year. You must have it in a year. Are you dictated to by that vote on account in the Assembly and then royal assent for that vote account? And if you are into a multi-year budget scenario, can the vote on account change? Can you upload your voting accounts?
Absolutely, yes. And in recent years, we have increased the percentage of the previous year that's been used for the vote on account. Yeah. Now, my colleagues in Central Expenditure Division would drive that, but it used to be, I think it was 45% every year, and we lifted it up to 75% to help provide some additional flexibility.
So you can upload the amount, but can you change the time of year that you do a voting account?
Well, the vote on account flows from the budget bill that accompanies the spring supplementary estimates. It finalises the control totals for, so we'll be taking forward the SSEs over the next few months, and it will finalise the amounts for the rest of the 24-5 year. The vote on account is put in place then to allow the financing of essential public services to continue unbroken from the 1st of April onwards, and to provide that period of time for the executive to agree the budget and for the Assembly to debate and take through. So really just to bridge the gap until the main estimates are agreed and voted through.
So it doesn't really matter when that voting account is, whether it be December, January, February, it's all about April.
Absolutely. That's the first day that we rely on the vote on account in terms of the cash flow.
Obviously DARE is the outlier because of the way funding is drawn down for them, and there's a payment scheme which is all encompassing. And I see your charts. I'm a spark, so colour shouldn't be a problem for me. But the green and the blue is DFC, and is that DOJ?
Health. Yeah.
So are they the ones that you would have on speed dial, basically? Are they the departments that you communicate with the most with regards to Conservative Fund?
Actually, health performance is actually very good in terms of their forecasting.
Right, okay.
And I think that's just the nature of their expenditure profile. You know, so much of theirs is salary driven, and their payment runs they can predict. And if you look at their percentage, and again I'm drifting into more budget now in terms of provisional outturn and their work on forecast outturn, they perform very well traditionally. So while they're our biggest spender, it's helpful that they're able to predict with a high degree of accuracy, and that certainly helps the performance overall of the block.
Has there been anything over the last number of years that have actually just shocked you with regards to requests for consolidated funds that you didn't see coming, basically?
A few years ago we had an issue with, I think it was a miscalculation actually in health around their cash requirement. It was just so we did need to use an advance to help address that. Thankfully it was of the magnitude that we were able to, and we were able to sort it out without any further redress, which we think was successful.
Again, it wasn't really a shock in the fact that we in Health had identified it in December, so although they didn't actually require the advance to March, we knew at that point in time that they would need money. So
well, enjoy your 4%.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No Bitcoin, is there? And then one final just comment or I guess request. One of the things we're doing as a committee is looking at financial services landscape, and also the other it's less to do with the budget making process. It's more of a strategic look. The last time you were here, we talked about the banking services that you avail of because you're a customer and probably quite a prestigious, I think maybe more than lucrative. I don't know if you named one specific bank or you've used multiple banks over the years, but if you have any input as someone who uses large cash services in terms of business banking in Northern Ireland, we'd be happy to hear that.
We've had a long-standing collaboration with Danske Bank.
Yeah.
I've been the government's banker for a very long time. We've currently got a 5-year contract that runs to, I think, 27. Mm-hmm. So we're in the middle of that contract period at the moment. Certainly we've found them to be very reliable in terms of service delivery for us. We have a fairly good working relationship with them. We manage the contract regularly. We've contract meetings with them. Our business partner has been particularly helpful over the years. So certainly we wouldn't have any major concerns. Yep. For us, I suppose success is that continual service, because there's a daily set of processes and activities. We just want access to our banking information on a daily basis and the ability to process. We've also worked closely with them in terms of like our business continuity plans. Yeah. Which has been helpful drawing on their expertise, and also they've helped us with.
You say business continuity plans, you mean if things go awry in a major way?
Absolutely. So we review our business continuity plans on a regular basis, and would test on an annual basis as well. So, but again, the kind of lessons that they have from their perspective has also been helpful for us. So that we're extending that collaboration. They've also helped us with their knowledge around cybersecurity.
Okay.
As well, which we're really pleased at. So it's a mature relationship, and we're continuing to access their expertise on other areas around our kind of bread and butter of daily transactions and processes.
That was most helpful. Anyone else has indicated they wish to ask questions, so thank you very much, Stuart, Joanne, Heather. We really appreciate your time and your patience. It's useful to keep in touch with you on this stuff. And thank you for it. So I'm sure we'll hear from you again on other matters. I know you're in front of the PAC as well, occasionally with regular. You have to sit in the PAC. You're the ex officio member.
I am indeed, yes.
Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Okay, thank you. So, members, just because we are pressed for time, I'm going to dispense with quite a lot of the correspondence. And just a couple of quick things so that they're out of the way, and then we'll come back and do any other bits next week. 10.5 and 7 are Hansard transcripts of previous oral briefings from the Department on the budget and relating to the banking services inquiry with the FSB and the Consumer Council. Members are content with those transcripts. They will be published. Grand. The next one is 10.8, which is Committee for Agriculture, Committee for ERA, and Committee for Infrastructure. They held a concurrent meeting on the 12th of November to discuss the A5 transport corridor with the Ulster Farmers Union. Following this, they agreed to raise a number of issues with the Minister of Finance in relation to LPS and the vesting of land for the corridor. The concurrent committee has also sought assurance about cross-departmental work in relation to this major road project, which just reminds me, while I'm at it, we should, in our request on FTC to the department, we should make specific request about vesting and whether how FTC could interact with the vesting process. I think just to 10.9, so people are content with that. Just to note, PAC report on vote on excess accounts. Report on excess votes, 23-24. As part of the control framework over spending, the PAC considers these reports regularly on votes on excess accounts. On this occasion, they report on 3 resource excesses, which is obviously similar to what we were just discussing with Stuart and his team. These total £3.24 million involving the Assembly Commission, DFC and the Utility Regulator. Possibly not a great look, the Assembly Commission's doing that, but I don't know all the details, so we'll leave it at that. There are no further recommendations regarding these issues. People just happy to note that. So we'll come back to other bits and pieces of correspondence. There's nothing hugely substantial or worrying at this point. The next agenda item is the draft forward work programme. I don't propose to discuss it in any detail. It will be published. We had a long discussion on it last week, so people can see it in their pack and online should they wish to. And obviously, we have not long left before the end of the year. Agenda item 10, any other business? Does anybody have any other business?
Chair, can I quickly ask the committee if they're willing to request from the department, once again we've been requesting it now for some considerable time, a timeline for subordinate legislation. We got a request came in today asking for us to do some subordinate legislation in an extraordinary time scale. This is not uncommon. If we don't know what's coming, we can't plan for it, we can't schedule it in. A lot of what is coming, the department should know. It's related to annual pieces of information. Where it's not, and the timescale has to slip or whatever, that isn't really an issue. We're just giving us an indication for scheduling. So if members are content, we will highlight again that we really need that timeline.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
Appreciate that.
Next agenda item is date, time, place of next meeting. It'll be in this room again in the Senate chamber at 2 o'clock on Wednesday, 27th November. We will have the Minister with us, so we have agreed to do a pre-brief for those who can make it, just at 1:45, so it's not too burdensome, and we'll just discuss just a brief running order if people are content with that. Okay?
Thank you,
so I'll just put the question, the committee to now adjourn, and the committee's now adjourned. Thank you.
Senate Chamber. Sound. Senate Chamber. Sound.